Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Austin Harrouff. Austin Harrouff was born on December 21, 1996, in Palm Beach, Florida, to a wealthy and respected family of doctors. His father was a successful dentist with multiple private clinics, and his mother was a leading pharmaceutical specialist. The family lived in a large, luxurious oceanfront home. When Austin was 13, his parents divorced, and his father moved out of the family home into a new residence with his new partner, who soon became his wife. Austin and his siblings stayed with their mother, but their father remained involved in their lives and provided financial support. Within a year, Austin's mother also remarried, and her new husband moved in with them. Although Austin struggled with his parents' divorce, he continued to excel academically and athletically. Austin dreamed of becoming a doctor like his parents and hoped to attend a prestigious medical school. In high school, he was both an honor student and an outcast. Despite his transformation into a tall, muscular, and charming young man, he remained shy and struggled to make friends and form romantic relationships. In his teenage diary, Austin wrote about feeling isolated at school, where his classmates labeled him a nerd and bullied him. He hoped that things would improve when he went to college, changed his social circle, and moved away from home. A few months before graduating from high school, Austin discovered that he had been accepted into the University of Florida's four-year medical program. During his teenage years, Austin kept a personal diary where he confided about being ostracized by his classmates, who called him a nerd and teased him relentlessly. He harbored hope that his life would improve once he entered college, formed new friendships, and gained independence from his parents. As he approached the end of high school, Austin received the exciting news that he had been accepted into the University of Florida's esteemed four-year medical program. Austin's successful program completion paved the way for promising career opportunities and the chance to attend any U.S. medical school. Overjoyed that his dream had come true, he began his college journey with his parents' support. In a vlog, he shared his transition to independent adult life, but despite this new chapter, his shyness persisted, making it difficult for him to connect with peers. Austin briefly dated a girl, but she ended the relationship due to concerns about his behavior. Instead, he focused on bodybuilding during his freshman year, dedicating significant time to the gym and achieving impressive results, including developing strong muscles. However, his success was not solely due to his hard work and perseverance. He had also started using steroids regularly. Austin started a YouTube channel in the spring of 2016, where he posted various videos. Some were about sports and bodybuilding, while others featured him singing and playing the guitar, doing cover versions of popular songs, and mimicking famous artists. He also shared his thoughts on life and philosophy. However, over time, Austin's videos became increasingly concerning. He began to advise his followers against using steroids, claiming they could drive people insane. He also talked about having a crazy and normal side and seemed confused by these different personalities. In some videos, he would speak in different accents, change his tone of voice, or burst into tears for no reason. His mood and facial expressions would also change suddenly, making it seem like he was just making faces at the camera. Looking back, experts believe that Austin was desperately trying to ask for help in his videos. The channel became his only outlet for expressing his feelings, as he struggled to make friends during his studies. Unfortunately, the videos also document his gradual descent into madness, with his behavior becoming more provocative, aggressive, and sensational. Many of his subscribers suspected that he was using controlled substances and recording his videos while under their influence. Austin's subscribers questioned him about his suspicious behavior, but he denied using drugs, citing his athletic background. However, his actions told a different story, with some even speculating that he might have a dissociative identity disorder. Meanwhile, when Austin returned home for summer break, his mother and sister were shocked by the drastic changes in him. Over the past year, Austin had undergone a dramatic physical transformation, building significant muscle mass. But the changes went beyond his physique. He had become increasingly odd, speaking nonsensically, and claiming he no longer needed sleep. At first, his family dismissed his claims, but they were forced to take him seriously when he insisted on patrolling the house at night, supposedly to protect them from dark forces. Austin followed through on his promise, wandering the house until morning, leaving his family concerned and confused. Every hour, Austin would check on his mother and sister, loudly reassuring them that they could sleep safely because he was watching over them. The next morning, his mother had a straightforward conversation with him, directly asking if he was using drugs. Austin honestly admitted that he had tried nearly every drug over the past year, explaining how each one affected him. He mentioned a powerful synthetic drug that caused intense hallucinations, violent outbursts, and could even be fatal. Despite this, Austin promised his mother that it was behind him and he no longer used the drug that had driven him to madness. After listening to her son, Mrs. Harrouff made a critical mistake. She didn't seek help from medical professionals, deciding instead to handle the situation on her own. As a pharmacist, she took matters into her own hands, giving Austin a sedative and a sleeping pill, thinking it would calm him down and help him sleep after a restless night. Austin continued to patrol the house every night, assuring its occupants that everything was fine and there was no need to worry. This went on for weeks, but the mother refused to seek professional help or tell her ex-husband about the situation. On the morning of August 13th, Austin unexpectedly visited a former classmate who lived nearby. The classmate was surprised by the unannounced visit, especially since they hadn't seen each other in over a year. When asked why he came, Austin claimed he had forgotten his birth year and urgently needed to know the answer. The classmate told him he was born in 1996. Austin then suddenly turned around and left without saying a word. His strange behavior frightened and confused the classmate, who immediately called Mrs. Harrouff to share what had happened and ask if Austin might be using drugs. She grew concerned about her son's behavior and decided to call her ex-husband, who was working in another state. She shared her worries with him, and he immediately flew to Florida to discuss the situation with their son. After talking to him, the father suggested that their son voluntarily check into a clinic for an evaluation, but the son refused. The father then had a heartfelt conversation with the mother, and together they decided to seek compulsory examination and treatment for their son at a drug rehabilitation or psychiatric facility. Unfortunately, they couldn't act fast enough. The next day, Austin's friends invited him to join them at the beach, taking advantage of the hot weather. His mother asked Haley to accompany her brother to keep an eye on him. Austin was thrilled about the outing, but he dressed unusually warmly, as if preparing for a trip to the mountains. He wore a thick athletic hoodie, long-sleeved pants, boots, and ski goggles. His friends were initially silent when they saw him, then burst out laughing. A few seconds later, the group started teasing Austin about his outfit, asking if he was okay. Austin's anger surged, and he threatened to harm one of them if they thought he was crazy. Although they didn't take him seriously, they backed off to be safe. Haley noticed her brother was on the edge and decided to intervene. She took him aside for a private conversation, where Austin revealed a shocking secret. He was half human, half wild animal, immortal, and possessed superhuman strength. Haley was frightened, but tried to stay calm to avoid provoking Austin further. Despite the intense conversation, Austin acted normally at the beach, joking and playing volleyball with friends. As the evening drew to a close, the group said their goodbyes and headed their separate ways. Austin and Haley went to a nearby restaurant to meet their father and his wife. On the way, Austin told Haley he wanted to test his immortality and then headed towards a busy highway, planning to cross it recklessly through the fast-moving traffic. Haley intervened when she realized what was happening and pulled her brother away, urging him to hurry because they had a prior commitment. Austin agreed not to keep anyone waiting and quietly followed his sister. During dinner, Austin's behavior was peculiar. He got up from the table several times, went outside, and looked around nervously, as if he feared someone was watching him. Upon returning, he revealed his immortality to his father and stepmother. When his father suggested seeking professional help, Austin became defensive, insisting he wasn't crazy, and in a fit of anger, pushed his father and stormed out of the restaurant. A young man's brutal attack on an elderly couple and their neighbor is a terrifying incident that unfolded like a horror movie. After leaving a restaurant, the young man, Austin, walked several miles until he stumbled upon an open garage in an unfamiliar neighborhood. Inside the garage was an elderly couple, John Stevens, 59, and Michelle Mishcon Stevens, 56, who were preparing for a quiet movie night. They married for over 25 years, had 3 adult children, and were enjoying their retirement. On this particular evening, John had gone for a walk with their dog while Michelle set up for their usual movie night. When Michelle saw Austin on their lawn, she didn't feel threatened and even offered to help him. However, the situation took a dark turn. Their neighbor, Jeffrey Pfizer, who lived across the street and was friendly with the Stevens, heard strange noises outside around 9 p.m. He looked into the yard and was met with Michelle's blood-curdling scream. Without hesitation, Jeffrey rushed to help his neighbors, where he saw a tall, large young man attacking an elderly woman by her open garage. Jeffrey tried to intervene, but the young man was incredibly strong and knocked him to the ground. As Jeffrey struggled to get up, the assailant stabbed him multiple times in the back and shoulder. Realizing he was outmatched and needed assistance, Jeffrey quickly ran into his friend's house to distract the attacker and lead him away from himself. He escaped through the back door and made his way to his own home. Once inside, he realized the assailant had not followed him and had returned to the neighbor's house, where Michelle was being attacked. Jeffrey immediately called the police and emergency services, reporting that he and his elderly neighbor had been victims of an armed attack by a stranger with a knife. After speaking with the emergency operator, Jeffrey fell silent, listening carefully. He soon became convinced that the attacker was no longer outside his door, but had remained at the neighbor's house. The assailant began making loud animal-like noises, similar to a wild beast growling, accompanied by screams of terror and moans. Tragically, the police took about 10 minutes to arrive, but by then it was too late. The assault had turned fatal, and the outcome was devastating. The officers were met with a horrific and inexplicable scene upon approaching the garage. 2 officers drew their weapons as they entered, but froze in shock at the doorway. Before them lay the lifeless body of Michelle Mishcon Stevens, the homeowner, in a pool of blood. The autopsy would later reveal that she had suffered multiple blunt force traumas to the head and a stab wound to the chest. As they ventured further into the dimly lit garage, they spotted 2 more individuals on the ground. It took a moment for the officers to comprehend the disturbing scene. One man was lying on the ground, desperately crying out for help in a strained voice. Above him, another man was pinning him down, grasping his neck with one hand and tilting his head back with the other. The officers ordered the attacker to release the victim, threatening to shoot if necessary, but the assailant didn't respond. Due to the risk of hitting the victim, firing was not an option. Instead, one officer pulled out a taser, warning the attacker that he was about to be stunned. As the officer moved closer, he was met with a gruesome sight. The attacker was not only holding the victim down, but was also biting his face, clutching his head and neck tightly. The victim was John Stevens, Michelle's husband, and he was lying in a vast pool of blood. Part of his left cheek was missing, and his lip, nose, and ear were severely mutilated, seemingly chewed off. An elderly man was severely attacked and unable to move, silently pleading for help. The officer tried to stop the attacker by using a taser, but it had no effect. The attacker continued to viciously bite the victim's face, even after receiving a kick to the face. Multiple kicks did not deter him. Additional police officers arrived, including one with a police dog, which was released to subdue the attacker. The dog bit the attacker's arm, but he showed no signs of feeling pain and managed to break free, causing himself further injury. Finally, a powerful kick from an officer disoriented the attacker long enough to allow him to be handcuffed. Immediately after being restrained, the attacker claimed he felt unwell, possibly due to something he had eaten, before losing consciousness and convulsing. 4 people were taken to the hospital after a violent incident. Mrs. Stevens died at the scene, and her husband died on the way to the hospital due to severe injuries from stab wounds. The injured neighbor, who reported the incident, survived but suffered permanent nerve and tendon damage to his right hand. The attacker, Austin Harrouff, fell into a coma after drinking weed killer from a bottle in the garage, which severely burned his esophagus and stomach. He spent several days close to death, but was eventually saved. When he woke up 2 weeks later, he claimed to have no memory of the events. Gradually, Austin started to remember the argument with his father and walking away. He then recalled seeing a ghost-like figure leading him through dark alleys until he saw a lantern near the Stevens garage, where he attacked Mrs. Stevens. He claimed to have seen her as evil and tried to rid her of it. When the neighbor, Jeffrey Fisher, intervened, Austin perceived him as a demon and attacked him with a knife. After Fisher escaped, Austin continued to assault Mrs. Stevens until she showed no signs of life. He then drank from the bottle thinking it was alcohol and soon heard a dog barking and a man's voice. Austin claimed no memory of what happened next. At the hospital, tests revealed no drugs, medication, or alcohol in Austin's blood, leading to suspicions of a psychotic break. The case attracted widespread media attention due to its brutality and uncertainty. While some believed Austin was faking insanity to avoid punishment, a psychological expert concluded that he had a mental illness that led to an acute psychotic episode. However, the prosecutor did not believe Austin met the legal definition of insanity at the time of the crime. Suggestions arose that Austin's mental health had deteriorated due to drug use and social difficulties, but he was clean at the time of the crime. Austin's father revealed a family history of schizophrenia, and a rare disorder called clinical lycanthropy delusion was suspected, which might explain Austin's wild behavior. However, no psychiatrists confirmed the diagnosis. After treatment, Austin was transferred to jail, where he awaits trial. His lawyers claim he is mentally ill, while the relatives of the victims hope he will be found competent and sentenced to death. The case of Elizabeth Arellano. Elizabeth Paula Arellano was born on August 16, 1987, in Fort Worth, Texas, where she spent her entire life. She grew up with her 2 sisters, Alessandra and Giovanna, and the 3 were incredibly close. After her biological father left the family when she was very young, her mother, Juanita, remarried a man named Fidel, who adopted Elizabeth and her sisters, treating them as his own. Elizabeth had a warm and loving relationship with her stepfather, who supported her in all her endeavors. She was a diligent student and dreamed of becoming a doctor one day. In high school, she met Rudolph Arellano, who was almost 8 years older than her, and the two began a romantic relationship. Although her parents were initially hesitant about their age difference, they trusted Rudolph and allowed the relationship to continue. At 16, Elizabeth married Rudolph and soon had 4 children, 3 sons, and a daughter. However, she didn't plan to give up her career aspirations to become a full-time mother. She pursued her childhood dream, graduating from medical school and working as a paramedic, with hopes of furthering her education to become a doctor. Elizabeth was a kind and pious woman, raised in a Christian tradition. She was devoted to her children and instilled in them the importance of loving and helping others. Those close to her described her as a caring and responsive person, always willing to lend a helping hand. From the outside, Her marriage to Rudolph appeared to be strong and happy, but beneath the surface, it was struggling. Rudolph's jealousy and controlling behavior had been a problem for years, and over time, it became increasingly unbearable. In the spring of 2016, Elizabeth finally reached her breaking point after another jealous outburst from her husband. Taking her children with her, she moved back to her parents' house. Rudolph attempted to reconcile, but Elizabeth was exhausted from tolerating his anger and didn't want her children to witness the constant fighting. So, she found the courage to file for divorce. Shortly after, Elizabeth mysteriously disappeared. According to her friends and family, she had been in good spirits and had decided to go out with colleagues to a local club after work to take her mind off her marital problems. On Friday evening, April 15, 2016, 28-year-old Elizabeth went out with her friends to a fun spot. She had a great time dancing, but didn't drink alcohol because she had driven her car to the club and planned to drive home. After a successful night out, Elizabeth returned home well past midnight on April 16th, parking her car outside her house. She then phoned a friend she had been with at the club to let them know she had arrived home safely. However, despite saying she was home, Elizabeth never actually entered the house. The next morning, her mother Juanita was frantic with worry when she discovered Elizabeth was not at home. She knew her daughter had planned to spend the evening with friends, but she should have been back long before. It wasn't like Elizabeth to disappear without a word, and the fact that her car was parked outside only added to the mystery. Clearly, Elizabeth had returned from the club, but where was she now? When Juanita approached the car, she was shocked to find it unlocked with the key still in the ignition. Her daughter's purse and phone were on the seat, indicating that something was seriously wrong. Juanita immediately called the police to report her daughter, Elizabeth, missing. The police were hopeful they could quickly solve the case, given the leads they had. There was no sign of struggle or blood in the car, suggesting Elizabeth might still be alive. However, to move forward, they needed to piece together a detailed timeline of Elizabeth's movements that evening. To start, the police interviewed Elizabeth's friends and colleagues, who confirmed the time she left their gathering and later spoke with her when she arrived home safely. The police also found several calls and messages from Elizabeth's ex-husband, Rudolph Arellano, on her phone, which showed he had tried contacting her multiple times that night. The police went to Rudolph's house to investigate his whereabouts on the previous evening and night. Rudolph claimed he had spoken to his ex-wife, Elizabeth, the night before, and she had promised to bring their children to him for the weekend. However, she stopped answering his calls, leading him to believe she had changed her mind. The police found Rudolph's alibi suspicious. He said he had been at a local bar with a friend that evening and returned home around midnight. While his friend and other patrons confirmed he was at the bar, no one could verify where he went after leaving. Since Rudolph lived alone, there was no one to confirm he went home, making it difficult for the police to rule him out as a suspect. The police were intrigued by Rudolph's calm demeanor, given that his ex-wife was missing and they were in the process of divorce. Despite being married for many years and Elizabeth being the mother of his children, Rudolph seemed unaffected by her disappearance, which only added to the suspicions surrounding him. On the night a young mother vanished, a fisherman phoned emergency services to report a bizarre event. He was sitting alone on a bridge that spans an interstate highway, fishing, when at around 4:30 a.m., he witnessed a car drive onto the bridge, stop, and then the driver throw a large object, resembling a person, into the water. From his distance, he couldn't see details, but it seemed like something heavy and bulky was tied to the person. The darkness and strong wind on the bridge prevented him from seeing the car's make and number or hearing any sounds. Shortly after, a second witness came forward, who was walking his dog near the bridge. Although he didn't see what happened on the bridge, a distressing scream caught his attention, followed by something large falling from the bridge, and a subsequent splash, then silence. Based on the witnesses' accounts, the police decided to investigate the pond near the bridge. A few hours later, divers discovered a body with a large concrete block tied to its neck with a rope. The body of Elizabeth Arellano, a missing woman, was found drowned. A passerby and a fisherman's testimonies helped locate her body, which would have likely gone undiscovered due to the strong tidal currents that prevented it from floating. An initial theory suggested that Elizabeth might have voluntarily ended her life due to family problems. However, this was quickly dismissed as it contradicted the witness account of someone throwing her into the water. Her relatives also confirmed that Elizabeth had big plans for her life and would never abandon her children and parents. The forensic medical results and a man's testimony, who heard Elizabeth's desperate screams as she was thrown off the bridge, revealed that she was still alive when a piece of concrete was tied to her neck. She subsequently suffocated to death. The brutal murder of Elizabeth, a mother of many, has left investigators baffled as to who could have committed such a heinous crime. Robbery has been ruled out as a motive, as none of her belongings were taken. Instead, it's possible that the killer may have stalked her from a club she visited or lay in wait for her at her home. Elizabeth's ex-husband, Rudolph, has denied any involvement in the crime, claiming he was at home sleeping on the night of the murder. However, investigators are not convinced, as he has no alibi and his behavior has raised suspicions. At his ex-wife's funeral, Rudolph appeared grief-stricken, saying he wished he could have died in her place. He even helped set up a charity to raise funds for her farewell ceremony, which seemed to convince his sister of his sincerity. However, when questioned again after the funeral, Rudolph's demeanor had drastically changed, as if nothing had happened. A review of CCTV footage has revealed a new lead. A car similar to Rudolph's was seen leaving Elizabeth's parents' house around 3 a.m. on the night of her murder. The neighbor remembered seeing the car parked near the deceased's house on the road. Similarly, another neighbor saw the car parked nearby. Significantly, it was discovered that the car later drove towards the bridge where the victim was thrown. This detail sparked many questions. When the investigation examined Rudolph's cell phone data for the night of the crime, the questions multiplied. The records showed that he made multiple calls, first near Elizabeth's workplace and then near his in-laws' home. Additionally, he sent several messages to his ex-wife, trying to find out when she would return, but received no response. It appears that he had been tracking her movements and eventually decided to wait for her return at her parents' house. The police gathered sufficient evidence to arrest Rudolph as the main suspect and take him in for further investigation. A crucial witness in the case was Rudolph's eldest son, who shared vital information with the authorities. When shown the rope found around his mother's neck, the boy recalled seeing it in his father's backyard, where he had played with it earlier. Additionally, the boy identified a piece of concrete from their garden, which had appeared after the fence was replaced. Significantly, small fragments of this concrete were discovered in the trunk of Rudolph's car. The investigation revealed that Rudolph had waited for his ex-wife at her parents' home, abducted her, and prevented her from entering the house. Rudolph Arellano kidnapped his ex-wife by forcing her into his car, where he had already prepared rope and concrete in the trunk. He then drove to a bridge, intending to kill her without being noticed. However, his plan was foiled when her body was later recovered from a lake. Arellano was arrested 10 days later, but initially denied any involvement in the crime, claiming he was at home on the night of the murder. Despite the overwhelming evidence and eyewitness testimony against him, Arellano maintained his innocence. However, faced with the possibility of the death penalty, he took his lawyer's advice and confessed to the crime. He cooperated with the investigation in hopes of reducing his sentence. It wasn't until January 2019 that Arellano pleaded guilty in court and provided a detailed account of how he kidnapped and murdered his ex-wife, the mother of their 4 children. The courtroom drama was intense, with Juanita, one of his daughters, fainting upon hearing his confession. His other daughters, Alessandra and Giovanna, were devastated, calling their sister's killer a monster. Rudolph showed no remorse or guilt for his actions, speaking about the murder in a cold and detached manner. He did not apologize or provide a motive for the crime. As a result, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Despite considering the sentence too lenient, Elizabeth's family chose to forgive Rudolph, as they did not want to be consumed by hatred. Her parents and sisters took on the responsibility of raising Elizabeth's children. The case of Stephen Freeman. Stephen Andrew Freeman was born on January 1, 1995, in Thomason, Georgia, to Troy and Jennifer Freeman. He and his brother Blake grew up in a happy and healthy environment with no major issues with their parents or society. Stephen was known for being kind, responsive, and calm, which helped him make many friends. Stephen attended Spalding High School and later studied at Gordon State College in Griffin, Georgia. Mary Catherine Higdon, his future partner, came from a respectable family and was raised with a carefree and humorous spirit. She was creative and enjoyed putting on mini plays for her family and neighbors. Stephen and Mary fell deeply in love during their senior year and remained inseparable. They shared many common interests, including a love for nature, hiking, fishing, and hunting. In 2012, Stephen updated his Facebook status to reflect his relationship with Mary, and the couple frequently posted photos together. Both families accepted each other's children, and after completing their education, the young couple moved in together. Stephen worked as a plumber, while Mary was a teacher's assistant and part-time salesperson. By summer 2018, Stephen and Mary had been living together for 7 years, but they had not yet gotten married. On August 1, 2018, at 10:42 p.m., Mary called emergency services in a state of panic. She reported that she had accidentally shot her boyfriend while handling a Glock 43 firearm, unaware that it was loaded. When paramedics and police arrived, Mary was in shock, kneeling beside Stephen's motionless body, crying and begging for help. She was eventually pulled away, allowing the officers to examine Stephen and provide first aid. Despite being shot in the chest, Stephen was still breathing and was rushed to Spalding Regional Hospital. Sadly, he died just before midnight. In shock and struggling to comprehend the tragedy, Mary visited the police station to give her account of the events. She claimed that the shot was accidental, explaining that there were always firearms in their home for self-defense, and that Stephen would often leave a pistol on the nightstand before sleep. On the fateful evening in question, Mary Catherine claimed she only intended to hand Stephen the pistol, but it accidentally discharged. She insisted she didn't know the gun was loaded and would never harm Stephen, the love of her life, intentionally. However, investigators discovered signs of a struggle in the kitchen, with food and dishes scattered everywhere. Detectives Adam Trammell and Chris Wilson found Mary's story highly unlikely and decided to investigate further. They questioned Mary again, using pressure tactics to get to the truth. Eventually, Mary confessed to shooting Stephen in anger during an argument. She revealed that she wanted to leave him, and the argument escalated. The investigators recorded the conversation, but unfortunately, most of the recording was lost due to technical issues. Further investigation showed that the pistol couldn't have fired accidentally, as it required a deliberate trigger pull. Moreover, the bullet's trajectory indicated that the pistol was pointed directly at Stephen. The detectives also questioned Mary's behavior, suspecting she was overacting and exaggerating her distress. It was also revealed that Mary worked at a gun store where she received thorough training on handling firearms. This meant she knew how to safely handle the pistol, making the accidental discharge scenario unlikely. The investigation uncovered inconsistencies in Mary's statements, including a claim that she tossed the pistol to Stephen, causing it to discharge. This contradicted her initial statement that she was simply handing him the pistol when it fired. Mary's changing statements worked against her, suggesting she was lying and trying to conceal her guilt. She was detained and charged with multiple crimes, including felony murder and aggravated assault. During the trial, Lieutenant Wilson disputed Mary's claim of an accident, instead arguing that she had planned and executed the crime deliberately. A key piece of evidence was the presence of cooking grease on the pistol's slide, which Mary explained was due to her preparing dinner for Stephen that evening. Friends and relatives of the couple described their complicated and tumultuous relationship, marked by frequent arguments and instances of Mary threatening to harm Stephen or herself with a weapon. Despite the complexities of the case, the evidence ultimately pointed to Mary's guilt. Stephen and Mary Catherine had a tumultuous relationship, with many weapons present in their home. 2 days before the tragedy on July 30th, 2018, they exchanged warm messages wishing each other a good day. However, the next day, Stephen told his mother he wouldn't return home to that devil and stayed at his friend Thomas's place. On August 1st, 2018, when Stephen didn't come home, Mary sent him hundreds of messages begging him to return. She prepared dinner and waited for him, later learning he was at Thomas's place and going to pick him up. They encountered each other on the road, and Mary shouted that she was waiting for him at home for dinner. Stephen replied that he was coming home. However, the evening ended in tragedy instead of a reconciliatory dinner. The police initially believed the case was a premeditated act driven by Mary's anger, but her defense team revealed a different side to their relationship. At her trial on June 17, 2019, Mary Catherine Higdon refused a plea deal for life imprisonment, insisting she couldn't harm Stephen because he was the love of her life. Mary claimed the incident was an accident and that she loved Stephen. She also accused him of abusive behavior, stating that he hit her twice and forced himself on her on the day of the tragedy. Friends and relatives testified that Mary was furious because Stephen often ignored her messages and calls. On the night of the incident, Stephen refused to eat the dinner Mary had prepared, which was the final straw for her. She couldn't hold back and fired at him. The prosecution presented physical evidence, including grease on the pistol and a sheet with bloodstains, showing that Stephen was not attacking Mary, but was sitting still on the bed when she shot him. In court, Mary finally gave a truthful testimony, describing Stephen as a harsh and controlling tyrant who had repeatedly hit, shaken, and threatened her. She confessed that he had constantly controlled and manipulated her, driving her to despair with unreasonable jealousy. The defense presented ample evidence to support her claims, including text messages that raised questions about who was the real tyrant and betrayer in the relationship. Stephen's message snippets suggested that he had insulted Mary Catherine and threatened her. However, what really sparked his anger was more disturbing. According to his friends, Stephen was furious with his girlfriend because he believed she had been unfaithful, which Mary denied. Mary Catherine claimed that Stephen had assaulted her twice before, and she feared he would hurt her again on August 1st, 2018. That's why she took action in self-defense. The defense presented an expert and close relatives of Mary who could testify to the domestic violence. Mary's sister, Sarah Higdon, confirmed that she saw bruises on Mary's arm 2 weeks before the shooting, though she regrets not taking a photo and initially believing Mary's explanation that the bruises were accidental. A tearful Mary Higdon told the jury that on the night of the incident, she decided to end things with Stephen once and for all, telling him to leave the house. Stephen became enraged, attacked her, and in self-defense, she grabbed the pistol from the nightstand, accidentally firing it. After Mary Catherine gave emotional testimony, the prosecution and defense teams clashed with Stephen's former friends, who had been close to Mary for years, as they tried to portray their deceased friend in a positive light. Thomas Skinner, Stephen's best friend, described Stephen as a loyal and hard-working country boy, while portraying Mary Catherine as an obsessive and possessive girlfriend who constantly controlled and stalked him. According to Thomas, Mary Catherine and Stephen's relationship had become toxic over time, with Mary threatening to end her life whenever Stephen tried to leave her. He also claimed that during an argument, Mary had once pointed a pistol at her head in front of Stephen. Another witness, Alicia Varela, who worked with Stephen, testified that Mary would obsessively call Stephen throughout the day, even when he was at work. However, during her court testimony, Mary omitted a crucial detail that prosecutor Kate Lenhard highlighted. While Mary described their interactions and how their relationship had deteriorated into physical abuse, she never mentioned the moment when she claimed to have acted in self-defense and pulled the trigger. Prosecutor Kate Lenhard was skeptical of Mary's admission, pointing out that during cross-examination, Mary never mentioned being mistreated by Stephen. Lenhard repeatedly asked Mary if a woman who felt safe at home would confront her attacker late at night and bring him back home, but Mary's response was unconvincing. Lenhard then recreated the events of the accidental shooting as she believed they occurred. According to her version, Stephen came home, and after listening to Mary, they got into an argument because he refused to eat dinner. Enraged, Mary threw the prepared food around the kitchen. Stephen tried to avoid further conflict by going to the bedroom and sitting on the bed, likely waiting for Mary to calm down. However, Mary was determined to confront him, calling out to him twice without getting a response. She then entered the bedroom and shot Stephen in the left side of his neck. Kate Lenhard pointed out the inconsistencies in Stephen Freeman's stories during police interrogations and court hearings, highlighting the contradictions in his accounts. Mary Catherine Higdon provided an emotional testimony about the alleged abuse she suffered at the hands of Stephen Freeman. However, before handing the case over to the jury, Kate Lenhard urged them to consider the possibility that Mary Higdon was not acting in self-defense, but rather was a mastermind of manipulation. The prosecution presented additional evidence and counter-arguments despite the lost confession recording. A forensic examination showed that Stephen Freeman was sitting on the bed at the time of the shooting, making it impossible for him to have been attacking Mary Higdon. Furthermore, while Mary claimed that the gun was always kept unloaded, detectives suspected that the pistol was actually loaded on the evening of August 1, 2018, when Mary was preparing a rope for Stephen. Here's a clearer explanation. The presence of grease marks on the slide and inside the pistol led investigators to suspect that Mary Catherine might have loaded the pistol beforehand. However, those who knew Stephen Freeman, including colleagues, neighbors, family friends, and acquaintances, consistently described him as non-aggressive. Meanwhile, Mary Catherine changed her story at least 10 times during the investigation, which prosecutors attributed to fear. Mary Catherine rejected a plea deal because she was facing a potential death sentence. As the jury deliberated, they heard from all the witnesses and the accused. After just 10 minutes, the jury was ready to deliver their verdict, but 2 jurors had lingering doubts about the prosecution's case. These jurors felt that the investigators, in their eagerness to charge Mary Catherine with premeditated murder, had overlooked crucial facts. They were particularly concerned that the prosecution had failed to thoroughly investigate Stephen Freeman's phone, including his text messages and browsing history. Ultimately, the only significant evidence against Mary Catherine was her own lies, which weren't enough to prove her guilt. The jurors' arguments, particularly those of Victor and Chris, had a significant impact. After deliberating, the jury returned a unanimous verdict of not guilty, freeing Mary Catherine Higdon after a lengthy process. The 12 jurors reached the following conclusions. They found the defendant not guilty on the first charge of malicious action and the second charge of serious action. The judge subsequently acquitted Mary Catherine Higdon of all charges, including intentional action, reckless action, assault with a deadly weapon, and carrying a weapon during the commission of a crime. The verdict shocked many in the courtroom, including Jennifer Freeman, who struggled to contain her anger towards the jurors. Those supporting Stephen's family were also stunned by the outcome. Following her acquittal, Mary Catherine returned home to Griffin to be with her family. Since then, she has maintained a low profile, avoiding social media to evade unwanted media and public attention. Mary Catherine's Instagram profile is private, and there is no information available about her current location. It is believed that she has moved on from her difficult past and is now living a quiet, private life. Stephen Freeman's mother paid tribute to her son on social media, remembering him as a kind and loving person. He lived a life full of love, joy, and friendship, and everyone who knew him considered him a friend. He especially cherished the relationships he made while hunting and fishing. Stephen had a special way of showing love and care to those around him. He made people feel seen and heard, often making them laugh until they cried. He was always smiling, hugging, and staying close to those he cared about. The case of Asel Nogoybayeva. Asel Nogoybayeva was born in 1986 in Tokmak, Kyrgyzstan. After finishing school, she took hairdressing courses and moved to Bishkek to work in a salon. There, she met Azamat Estebesov, who came to her salon for a haircut. They hit it off, and he invited her out for coffee. Asel's family approved of Azamat, who was religious and respectful of Muslim traditions. At 19, she married him, and soon they had a son. However, Azamat's behavior changed, and he became abusive. One evening, while bathing their son, Azamat accidentally poured too much water on him, causing the child to cry. Asel reacted angrily, and Azamat responded by hitting her in the face. Asel left with her son and went to her mother's house. Azamat apologized and begged for forgiveness, promising it would never happen again. However, Asel, who had grown up without a father, was determined to make her marriage work for the sake of her son. She believed Azamat's apology and thought they could move forward. The family returned to Tokmak, and Asel became pregnant with their second child. However, Azamat's abuse continued. One day, while Asel was walking with her son, she ran into some classmates, and after the walk, Azamat struck her again. Asel suffered a devastating blow from her husband Azamat, which caused her to fall and miscarry. This incident triggered a pattern of abuse, with Azamat constantly looking for excuses to beat her. Despite his once kind and attentive nature, Azamat's gaze was now filled with anger and hatred. Asel felt trapped, living under Azamat's total control, and her only solace was her children. Her mother, aware of the situation, eventually took Asel in, but Azamat continued to harass her, begging for forgiveness and promising to change. However, he would return to his abusive ways, and Asel would be forced to endure it. Asel went to the police multiple times, but domestic violence is not punishable by law in Kyrgyzstan, and Azamat would only receive short sentences. The abuse continued for 6 years, with Azamat threatening to kill Asel and her family if she ever filed for divorce. Asel's family finally helped her escape to Italy, where she worked multiple jobs to save money and become financially independent. After 3.5 years, she had enough to buy an apartment and start a business. Although she was relieved to be free from Azamat's abuse, she missed her children and worried about their well-being. When Asel returned to Kyrgyzstan, she was shocked to find her children living in squalid conditions, neglected and uneducated. Azamat had raised them according to traditional Turkic values, forcing them to attend a madrasa instead of school. Asel took her children back, but Azamat continued to harass her, eventually cornering her and raping her in a dark alley. Asel reported the incident to the police, and Azamat was detained. However, his family intervened, pressuring Asel to withdraw her complaint. According to Kyrgyz tradition, it is shameful for she to report her husband's abuse, and Azamat's relatives convinced Asel to retract her statement in exchange for Azamat's relinquishment of parental rights. Asel's ex-husband, Azamat, remained her official father despite his abuse. In fact, the Sakalu District Court dismissed a case against him due to a counter-application and reconciliation. However, after his release, Azamat began harassing and threatening Asel, sending her daily messages saying he would kill her if he caught her. He waited for her at her driveway, work, and followed her everywhere for 3 months. Asel's relatives took turns living with her and her children to protect her, but this didn't save her from Azamat's second violent attack. On January 31, 2023, Asel reported to the police again that Azamat had used force against her, and a criminal case was opened. The suspect was detained, but instead of a 5-year imprisonment, he was given 3 years of probation due to his elderly mother's disability and his 2 children. Asel was devastated and felt driven into a corner with no escape. She didn't believe anyone and didn't listen to Azamat's relatives. Instead, she hired a lawyer and filed an appeal with the CH Regional Court, providing all the threatening messages and voice recordings. However, a series of events constantly postponed the hearing, bringing closer the worst day of Asel's life. Azamat continued to walk freely and make attempts on her life, even sending her a photo of a black backpack with a knife and rope, saying he was ready to meet her. On September 20, 2023, Asel woke up her children, had breakfast with them, and accompanied her eldest son to school. As she was about to leave the house, Azamat suddenly appeared and hit her on the head twice. He then grabbed her throat and started strangling her, causing her to lose consciousness. When Asel regained consciousness, she realized that her son was crying and begging Azamat not to harm him. Azamat threw Asel to the floor, picked her up, and continued to abuse her. He stabbed her face and neck with a clerical knife in cold blood. The next time Asel regained consciousness, she was surrounded by blood and didn't realize what was happening. She had lost a lot of blood and her throat was dry, and all she could do was ask for a drink. Asel's ex-husband, Azamat Estebesov, brought her a bucket containing water mixed with blood, revealing his sinister intentions. He started selecting a knife from the kitchen, preparing to inflict harm. His goal was to reach Asel's heart, implying a deep and fatal wound. Just as he was about to attack, the police burst into the house, responding to a call from a concerned neighbor who had heard Asel's screams and knew about her troubled past with Azamat. This timely intervention saved Asel's life. Azamat resisted the officers, attacking them with a knife. Amidst the chaos, the brutal extent of the attack was unclear, but the apartment was covered in blood. It was later revealed that Azamat had started cutting Asel in the bathroom, then dragged her to the kitchen, severing her nose and ears, inflicting multiple wounds on her face and neck, cutting her throat, and beating her severely. When the district police officers arrived, they quickly called an ambulance, assessing the severity of Asel's injuries. In their search for the removed organs, they were unable to find them. Her ears and nose were shockingly found in the monster's pocket. After finding her, the police took Asel to the 4th City Hospital in Bishkek, but surprisingly, the doctors refused to provide her with first aid, claiming she didn't belong to their hospital based on her regional identity card. Not only did the doctors neglect to treat Asel, but they also failed to stop her bleeding. It wasn't until she was taken to a second hospital that she finally received first aid and the bleeding was stopped. Asel was then transferred to the National Hospital, where she underwent a 9-hour operation. A team of 6 doctors worked meticulously to restore her face, carefully reattaching her severed organs, including her earlobes and nerve nodes, which had been precisely cut off with a special knife. The nose was also completely severed. Asel remained unconscious for a long time after the operation, but miraculously survived. Psychologists warned that her recovery would be a long and perilous journey. She was brutally attacked and left disfigured. The authorities launched a criminal investigation into the incident, resulting in the detention of the suspect, who was sent to a pretrial detention center on September 27, 2023. The suspect, Azamat Estebesov, was initially sentenced to a lesser punishment, but thanks to a presidential decree, his sentence was increased to 8 years of imprisonment. The presidential decree also led to the dismissal of 9 judges, including Kelbek Toto Mamatov from the Soik District Court of the CH region, who had previously released Estebasov under probation supervision. The judges were dismissed due to violations of the Code of Conduct for Judges. The authorities then reopened all previous cases involving Estebasov, with 6 investigators re-examining the evidence. As a result, they found new evidence and brought new charges against him, with a total of 11 articles in the updated indictment. Azamat Estebasov's trial concluded on January 26, 2024. After investigative activities ended in December 2023, Estebasov denied all 11 charges against him and refused to answer the judge's questions, sometimes claiming demonic possession. He also behaved aggressively towards witnesses, leading to a trial postponement. Judge Tulkadir Kulova ultimately sentenced Estebasov to 20 years in prison without parole, plus a fine of 880,000 sums to the state and 2 million sums to his ex-wife. 1 day in pretrial detention counted as 2 in the sentencing. Estebasov appealed, but the sentence remained unchanged. Asel Nuibayeva, Estebasov's ex-wife, expressed her intention to continue seeking justice, demanding life imprisonment for her former spouse and punishment for those who enabled his actions. She hopes to set an example to prevent other women in Kyrgyzstan from suffering as she and her family have. Asel Nogobayeva's family and activists are demanding a life sentence for her ex-husband, Azamat, who continued to send threatening texts to Asel even after being imprisoned, warning her that he would find her when he got out. This case has highlighted the powerlessness of women in the face of the law in Kyrgyzstan, and how a loving partner can suddenly turn into a ruthless aggressor. The case has sparked widespread outrage across Kyrgyzstan, prompting Asel's sister, Diana Yellen, to appeal to members of parliament to pass a law on domestic violence. She warned that if they failed to do so, she would hold them accountable for their inaction, emphasizing that one wrong decision could have devastating consequences. Asel's sister also launched a petition calling for Azamat to be sentenced to life in prison without parole. Asel's sister stated that her sister's experiences with domestic abuse were a stark reminder of the dangers of violent partners. She recounted that even after divorcing her husband 5 years ago due to his physical and emotional abuse, he had continued to stalk, beat, and torment her. She asserted that people like Azamat Estebasov posed a significant threat to society and should not be allowed to roam free, describing them as obsessive and dangerous individuals who belonged behind bars. She demanded a life sentence without parole for the person who had already inflicted severe emotional trauma on his victim. She urged everyone to sign the petition, regardless of where the heinous crime had taken place. She emphasized that domestic violence could take many monstrous forms and that it was essential for women worldwide to unite against this issue. She reminded everyone that a person's religious beliefs did not guarantee their moral character. She mentioned that Asel had started a new life, but her new identity had brought her immense pain. Although her physical wounds were slowly healing, recovering her hearing and breathing functions would be a long and arduous process. In a recent interview, Asel had shared the heartbreaking experience of seeing her face for the first time after the tragedy. Asel had said that she wasn't allowed to look at herself in mirrors, so there weren't any in her room. One day, when her doctors were away, she had taken advantage of the situation to go to the first floor to get dressed. As she was removing her bandages, she had caught a glimpse of herself in a metal operating lamp that the on-duty doctor had left behind. Seeing her reflection had shocked her so much that she had lost consciousness. 2 weeks later, Asel's brother decided to let her see her face while dressing her at home. To prepare, he removed all the mirrors in the house except for one in the bathroom that couldn't be taken down. When he briefly left the room, Asel quickly got up and took a look at herself in the mirror. The shock was too much, and she fainted. She was overcome with hysteria, saying that no one should ever have to see such ugliness. However, Acel still had a long way to go before her face could be fully restored. Before undergoing plastic surgery, she would need multiple operations to rebuild her face, including reconstructing her ears and nose. These surgeries would require extensive preparation, skin grafting, and a recovery period of at least a year. Additionally, Acel had lost 20% of her hearing, which would also need to be corrected. Acel Nogoybaeva, she who was brutally mutilated by her ex-husband, requires a series of complex operations to restore her ears and nose. Unfortunately, these operations cannot be performed in Kyrgyzstan and must be done in a country like Turkey, which requires a significant amount of money. A Turkish plastic surgeon, Miki Sur, offered to perform the surgery for free, covering all costs. However, after examining Acel, he realized that plastic surgery alone would not be enough. She needs a series of operations to restore her organs before the reconstructive surgery can take place. The total cost of the surgeries is estimated to be at least $445,000. Acel's sister, Diana Yellen, is working to raise awareness and funds for the operation, which will take place in Turkey. So far, they have not yet raised even half of the needed $45,000, and there are additional expenses for accommodation, psychological support, rehabilitation, interpretation, medication, and more. Diana Yellen shared heartbreaking photos of her sister Acel, who was brutally attacked by her ex-husband, leaving her face severely disfigured. The doctors did everything they could to save her, but unfortunately, her ears and nose were beyond repair. Diana is outraged and frustrated with the judiciary of Kyrgyzstan, who allowed her sister's attacker to walk free on probation just a year ago. She believes that if the judge had made a stricter decision, Acel's ordeal could have been prevented. To raise awareness about domestic violence against women, Diana is organizing fundraising events to help her sister's recovery and rehabilitation. Acel, who has endured 12 years of abuse, dreams of opening a foundation to support women who have suffered similar traumas. Diana wants to spread a powerful message to women everywhere. Never tolerate abuse and do not expect your abuser to change. Instead, run away and never look back. The true ugliness lies not in Acel's disfigured face, but in the heart of her ex-husband, who committed this heinous act. Diana warns that if they cannot raise sufficient funds to support Acel's recovery, she will be forced to share her sister's graphic photos to shame the authorities into taking action. She appeals to every judge, policeman, and deputy to take a close look at Acel's face and remember the consequences of their inaction. The case of Ronelle Burns. Kiana was born on September 15, 1977, in St. Louis, Missouri. After graduating from Riverview Garden High School, she attended St. Louis Community College in Florissant Valley, where she studied cosmetology. She soon turned her passion into a successful business, opening her own beauty salon, which became popular thanks to her hard work and dedication. Over the next 20 years, Kiana's salon grew to become one of the largest in the St. Louis area, a testament to her persistence and entrepreneurial spirit. However, her personal life was not without its challenges. Despite her success, Kiana struggled to find a suitable partner until she met her future husband, Ronelle Burns, at the age of 44. Prior to meeting Ronelle, Kiana had 3 children from previous relationships, whom she loved deeply. Her family and friends describe her as a loving mother, supportive friend, and accomplished businesswoman. Ronelle Burns was born on May 14, 1975, in St. Louis, Missouri. He graduated from the High School of Fashion in 1994, where he excelled in basketball and competed for a state championship. Ronelle was driven, ambitious, and passionate about competition, always striving for greatness. Before meeting Kiana, Ronelle had 2 children from a previous relationship. When they met, they brought together their strong work ethics and ambition, creating a new, happy family. On September 13, 2012, Ronell and Keanu got married in a beautiful wedding surrounded by relatives and friends. After the wedding, Keanu discovered a new side of Ronell. It turned out that Ronell had dedicated his life to Jesus Christ at a young age and wanted to serve the Lord. He began helping anyone he could, including people he met on the street. Ronell even created a website where he coached and preached to spread his message. Ronell believed that God spoke to him in his early years, instructing him to help others. He interpreted one of these calls to mean that sometimes God chooses to communicate with everyone, and only He can allow certain events to occur in life. Ronell pursued his ministry, and his video messages gained immense popularity online. In addition to his impactful work as a church coach, Ronell was a financial counselor and insurance agent. He founded Traditional Financial Solutions, a company dedicated to helping people worldwide achieve financial independence. Ronell achieved great success in his business and humanitarian efforts, and his speeches drew large crowds. His wife, Kiana, supported him, and together they gained popularity online. Ronell was already well established as a leader and coach in the Six-Figure Ambition program, an online initiative for entrepreneurs. He had a substantial following on social media, with over 7,000 fond followers on Instagram and 2,000 subscribers on his educational YouTube channel. By combining their business skills and family values, Ronell and Kiana Burns created something remarkable that positively impacted thousands of people. Kiana was a motivational speaker who shared her insights on success at business events. She also had a strong online presence, with 14,000 followers on Instagram, where she posted about her family life and inspiring quotes. In a popular video message, Kiana and her partner appeared dressed in luxury brands, talking about the benefits of entrepreneurship on their lives and those of their thousands of subscribers. The couple emphasized that their goal is to teach their audience how to become successful entrepreneurs and build a solid business foundation. They urged young entrepreneurs to stop wasting their hard-earned money and instead invest it wisely to generate passive income. Their message concluded with the belief that anyone can achieve greatness, not by being great from the start, but by taking the first step towards it. In the Burns family, only Kiana has achieved the success that Ronell often talks about. She has worked hard to build and operate a network of salons on her own, and was also a successful insurance agent. Her business generated most of the family's income. Ronell, on the other hand, focused on projecting an image of wealth, often posting photos of the family in expensive clothes and at fancy restaurants. Meanwhile, the wealthy and successful individuals took action, while poor people were drawn to the Burns family's enticing stories of making big money without effort. Ronell received a lot of attention from outsiders because everyone wants to become rich. He eventually founded a company with ambitious six-figure goals, allowing him to continue building his wealth and creating his own legacy, which he frequently boasted about in interviews. The Burns had built a close-knit family unit, and to outsiders it seemed like they were living the perfect life. Ronell and Kiana, both successful in their careers, were inspirations to many, and their children, Rhea, Makai, and Ray Haley, were a big part of their lives. However, beneath the surface, trouble was brewing. Ronell suggested that Kiana leave her hometown of St. Louis and move to Atlanta, a decision that didn't sit well with her. Despite their 3 children together, Kiana was forced to make the move, as Ronell had plans to expand their business. Kiana put on a brave face and pretended to be happy with the decision, but deep down, she was reluctant to leave St. Louis. On social media, she presented a perfect picture of her life, posting photos of the luxurious gifts she received from Ronell, such as a Maserati Levant car and her collection of Louis Vuitton bags. She would accompany these posts with captions expressing her gratitude and admiration for her husband. Like many social media influencers, Kiana also frequently posted about her family and children, painting a rosy picture of her life. Kiana, a woman who appeared to have a perfect life, revealed to her audience that everything wasn't as smooth as it seemed. In reality, she and her partner were on the brink of divorce after moving to Atlanta. This left Kiana alone in a new city, where she had to start from scratch. In a heartfelt video message, Kiana opened up to her subscribers about the challenges she faced when deciding to move and adapt to a new home and people. She emphasized that adjusting to new environments and people without the support of loved ones can be incredibly tough. Kiana also shared her struggles with mental health, expressing concerns about not being strong enough to overcome life's challenges. However, the question remains, was the move to Atlanta the primary reason for the imbalance in her family, or were there other underlying factors at play? In a speech, Kiana refused to mention that the real reason for the problems in their relationship was Ronald's infidelity and promiscuity, which he had kept hidden from their seemingly perfect life on social media. Later that night, Kiana posted a video of herself happily dancing at home with one of her daughters. However, a few hours later, the situation took a tragic turn. Kiana and Ronald got into a long and intense argument, which ended with Kiana grabbing a gun, shooting Ronald, and then herself. By the time the police arrived, neighbors had already gathered outside the Burns' home, reporting that they had heard gunshots coming from inside. The investigation initially suggested that Ronald Burns had taken his own life. But the discovery of Kiana's body in the next room with a gun in her hand revealed that she was the one who had made the fatal decision. While it was clear that Kiana had killed her husband, some people believed that she had been driven to do so after discovering his infidelity. Others thought that the couple's severe debt and Ronald's con artist tendencies had led to the tragic event. As people dug deeper into the couple's lives, they uncovered some revealing information from Ronald's ex-wife. She disclosed that during their divorce, she had learned that Ronald was a habitual cheater and had been reckless with her finances, leading to a ruined credit history and failed jobs. Ronald had then met Kiana, a successful career woman who was drawn to his confidence and charisma. Ronald, in turn, was attracted to Kiana's wealth, and the two seemed like a winning combination. However, their business ventures ultimately failed, leaving only Kiana's beauty salon intact. Despite this, Ronald continued to pretend to be a successful businessman, convincing others of his non-existent achievements. The Burns family presented a false image on social media, showcasing lavish purchases and happy relationships to conceal their severe financial struggles. Ronald posted about his business ventures, claiming he could turn any idea into a profitable success. Behind the facade of a devout Christian couple, they shared Bible quotes and scripture in their posts. They flaunted their luxurious lifestyle, posting photos of their homes, parties, and vacations, creating an illusion of wealth. However, this was all a ruse to hide their true circumstances. Unbeknownst to their followers, Ronald worked for a fraudulent American marketing insurance company that preyed on middle and lower-income families, exploiting them for financial gain. He even tried to recruit his own family and friends to join the scheme, seeking to boost his status. Despite his efforts, Ronald failed to generate enough income from the company and struggled to support himself. The Burns couple pretended to be prosperous entrepreneurs, convincing those around them of their success, and even creating a TV show, Meet the Burns, to showcase their supposedly lavish lifestyle. However, their arrogance blinded them to their financial reality, and they spent all their earnings on luxuries, trying to be someone they were not. This reckless spending ultimately led to their downfall and bankruptcy. On December 19, 2019, Kiana and Ronald Burns officially filed for bankruptcy and had to sell some of their assets to pay their debts. Despite their financial troubles, Ronald and Kiana continued to present a false image of a happy family and successful business. But it became increasingly difficult to maintain this facade in St. Louis. Ronald, seeking to further his fraudulent activities, convinced his family to relocation to a larger city. This decision would prove to be yet another mistake. Despite their thriving business being their sole source of income, Kiana reluctantly agreed to the move. However, Kiana struggled to adjust to life in Atlanta. She was already aware of Ronald's repeated infidelities and had grown tired of her patient and silent nature. The couple jointly decided to divorce, but in the divorce papers filed on October 10, 2021, Ronald deceitfully cited Kiana's infidelity as the reason. Devastated, Kiana understood Ronald's motives were to maintain his public image, as their friends and family were unaware of the couple's troubles. Ronald sought to conceal the truth from the public, but on October 20th, 10 days after the divorce filing, Kiana publicly addressed a serious matter on live TV, her usual bright smile replaced by a concerned and sorrowful expression. After divorcing his first wife, Ronald Burns remarried a successful and wealthy woman named Kiana, adopting the persona of a devout guru to hide his true nature. He continued to exploit his new wife's trust and wealth, pretending to be a successful businessman. However, their seemingly perfect marriage was a facade. On November 9, 2021, Kiana shot and killed her husband Ronald before taking her own life. The Sandy Springs Police Department reported that no one else was present at the time of the incident. The tragic event left 8 children without parents. Despite the shocking turn of events, there was no record of domestic violence at their Atlanta home. In the weeks leading up to the incident, Kiana had asked her Facebook friends to pray for her, hinting at deeper struggles. The exact reasons behind her actions remain unknown. It's difficult to judge someone's decisions when they are struggling with depression and other mental health issues. The tragedy is compounded by the fact that 8 children are now left without parents, forced to navigate the world on their own. News of Ronald Burns and his wife Kiana's passing has spread quickly through their large social circle. Their deaths have been widely shared on social media, with many friends and acquaintances expressing sadness and sharing stories about the couple. Even those closest to them have paid tribute, although one friend's post revealed that few people knew the truth about the family until the end. Ronald Burns was known for flaunting his wealth and success, which often masks insecurity. He became so convinced of his own importance that he lost sight of reality. He ruined the lives of multiple successful women, misleading them with false promises of happiness and success. People like him have no self-respect or dignity. He's a con artist who preyed on his wives, deceiving them with fairy tales of eternal love and happiness. Unfortunately, he was able to manipulate them by playing on their emotions. The case of Amato family. Margaret and Chad Robert Amato got married in the mid-1900s. At the time, Margaret had a 3-year-old son named Jason from a previous marriage. Chad was not deterred by this and was willing to raise Jason as his own. They had 2 more sons, Grant and Cody. Grant was very shy and found it difficult to make friends, so he relied on his brothers for companionship. As he grew up, Grant remained modest and introverted, still struggling to connect with his peers. After their eldest brother Jason left home, Grant became especially close to Cody. The 2 brothers pursued medical degrees together and eventually became anesthesiologists. However, Grant often made mistakes and needed Cody to double-check his work. In August 2018, Cody took a break from work and decided to travel the world for a change of scenery. He dreamed of visiting Japan and invited Grant and their best friend, Jeremy, to join him on the journey. Grant became fixated on a mysterious webcam model named Sylvie, aka Sylvia Vanessa Lavova from Bulgaria, after meeting her on a website where he paid for private online interactions with various women. He began to believe that Sylvie genuinely cared for him and that they could have a real relationship. To ensure her loyalty, Grant spent thousands of dollars daily and showered her with expensive gifts such as lingerie and jewelry, which she would wear during their video calls. Desperate to impress Sylvie, Grant fabricated stories and lost touch with reality. He lied about living alone in a large house, owning a successful business, and having the ability to lavish her with money. To back up his claims, Grant sent her large sums of money, starting with a few thousand, then $10,000, and eventually $100,000 as a birthday gift. Grant's excessive spending from his parents' accounts eventually caught their attention. At first, he claimed it was for his online project, but Chad and Margaret soon realized he was lying. This led to a major family argument, with his father demanding he leave the house immediately. However, his mother and Cody intervened on his behalf. The family recognized that Grant was struggling with severe internet addiction, yet they were shocked to discover that he had spent nearly $200,000 from their accounts. A search of his room revealed vials of potent substances, which Grant claimed he used to cope with the emotional strain. His parents decided to cut off his access to their accounts and planned to send him to a rehabilitation clinic for treatment of his drug and internet addictions. Feeling desperate, Grant threatened to end his life. He stormed out of the house, got into his car, and sped away. It was later discovered that Grant had driven to his aunt and uncle's house, damaging their fence and garage wall in the process. His relatives, aware of the turmoil within the Amato family, took pity on him and offered him a place to stay until things calmed down. Grant's parents asked him to stop seeing Sylvie, but he didn't listen. Instead, he stole thousands of dollars from his kind relatives to pay for his interactions with her. When his aunt found out, she told his parents, who promised to handle the situation and get the stolen money back if she didn't call the police. Chad, Grant's father, went to the relative's house and took Grant, who desperately needed help. Chad, along with Margaret and Cody, realized that talking to Grant wasn't working and that if he left home, he would likely steal again. So, they gave him an ultimatum. Either he would go to a rehab clinic to get treatment for his addiction, or he would face jail time for theft. Grant reluctantly agreed to enter the clinic, where he would spend 2 months away from temptations. Grant was admitted to a medical institution in December 2018 to receive treatment for his drug and internet addictions. While he was in treatment, his parents accessed his computer and were shocked to discover that he had been spending thousands of dollars a day from their family accounts on a woman named Sylvie. They found intimate online interactions between Grant and Sylvie, which Grant had recorded and repeatedly watched. Grant's parents decided to contact Sylvie and inform her that the man who had been showering her with gifts and money was not a successful businessman, but rather an unemployed addict who had stolen the funds from his family. They warned Sylvie that Grant could face criminal charges for his actions. However, Sylvie was unmoved, viewing her interactions with Grant as simply a job and refusing to return the stolen money. On January 5, 2019, Grant suddenly returned home from treatment, having completed less than a quarter of the rehabilitation program. He had fled the clinic, where he had shown complete non-compliance with the program. Grant tearfully promised to turn his life around and get a job, but threatened to end his life if his parents forced him to return to the rehab center. His parents agreed to let him stay home, but only under strict conditions. Grant was on a tight leash, no computer use, a strict daily routine, and close monitoring of his earnings. To help him get back on track, he was given a part-time job at a local grocery warehouse, which he held for about 3 weeks. Grant appeared to be cooperative, leading his parents to believe he had overcome his addictions and matured. However, on Thursday, January 24, 2019, Grant convinced his mother to let him use the laptop for a short time to check his email and post his resume online, hoping to find a better job than his current warehouse position. Margaret trusted her son and allowed him to use the laptop, a decision that would prove to be a critical mistake. As soon as Grant got online, he tried to contact Sylvie, but he discovered that his parents had already exposed the truth about him to her. Feeling betrayed, Grant believed his parents had humiliated him in front of the only woman he loved, and he sought revenge. Grant's anger turned deadly when he remembered the guns his family kept at home. While his father had locked the main collection in a safe, Grant knew about another loaded gun kept in his parents' bedroom. This was the gun he decided to use to take brutal revenge on his family. Grant's mother was working on the computer in the home office when her youngest son, Grant, sneaked up behind her and shot her in the back of the head. She didn't even have time to turn around or realize what was happening. Next, Grant waited for his father to come home from work. As soon as he walked into the kitchen, Grant shot him twice in the chest. Grant then thought of an even more sinister plan. He decided to blame his own brother, Cody, who had always been supportive and helpful towards him and was his best friend. Cody had moved out of the family home and was living with his girlfriend. Grant used his deceased father's phone to send Cody messages, telling him to come home right away because something terrible had happened. Grant gave his brother only a little information, trusting it would be enough to make him leave work immediately. Grant was right. Cody rushed home from work, even leaving early. As soon as Cody entered the house, he made his way to the bottom of the staircase that led to the second floor. But before he could go any further, he was shot and fell to the ground. Cody didn't die right away. He had time to understand the terrible situation he was in, but he was unable to do anything to change it. Grant murdered his family and then carefully covered his tracks. He wiped his fingerprints from the pistol, placed it in his brother's hand to frame him, and left it next to the bodies to make it seem like Cody had killed their parents and then taken his own life. Grant then calmly packed his belongings, downloaded incriminating video files from the computer, and even sent a text to Sylvie to tie up loose ends. He loaded his essentials into the car and drove away. However, the police quickly tracked him down and arrested him at a small motel in Orange County just over a day later. Grant was more disappointed than surprised, but he vehemently denied any involvement during his interrogation. Grant fabricated outlandish stories about his father's alleged cruelty towards him, his mother, and brother, claiming his father tried to keep him apart from his girlfriend Sylvie, whom he claimed to truly love. His account of the events on the evening of January 24, 2019, was confusing, inconsistent, and lacked credibility. Grant claimed that his brother Cody got into a fight with their father, grabbed a gun, and accidentally killed Chad and Margaret. However, Grant wasn't present during the incident and only pieced together the events based on what he thought might have happened. Grant said he was kicked out of the house by his father and spent the night in his car. The next morning, he drove away without knowing what had occurred at home. However, his story had many inconsistencies and didn't add up. The evidence suggested that Grant was the one who had killed his family members. As a result, Grant was arrested and charged with the murder of his father, brother, and Margaret. He was held in custody on a $750,000 bond, which he couldn't afford to pay. The trial began on July 15, 2019. Almost all the witnesses who testified, including Grant's brother Jason, relatives, and Cody's friend Jeremy, spoke against Grant. Those who knew him described Grant as a person with addiction problems, a compulsive liar, and a thief. He had even stolen money from Jeremy during their trip to Japan. The key evidence against Grant was a large bank transfer from his brother Chad's account to his own younger son's account, which took place late at night after the family members had been murdered. To authorize the transfer, Grant had used the finger of his deceased father to bypass the account's biometric identification system. The prosecution sought the death penalty, arguing that Grant's actions were premeditated and heinous. However, the defense claimed that Grant was mentally ill and required treatment rather than punishment. On August 12, 2019, the court delivered its verdict, finding 30-year-old Grant Amato guilty of 3 premeditated murders. As a result, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. the case of Paige Bergfeld. After high school, Paige attended the University of Florida's nursing school, where she met Howard Bigler. They started dating after realizing their mutual feelings for each other. After graduating with a nursing degree, Paige returned to Colorado to live with her family. In 1995, she and Howard got married. At first, they seemed like a happy couple, sharing many common interests and views. However, they had a significant disagreement that eventually led to their divorce. Paige wanted to have a child and start a family, but Howard didn't share her desire. This issue caused frequent arguments and discussions, but they couldn't find a compromise. In 1997, they decided to divorce. Despite this, they remained friends due to their strong connection. Paige later married Rob Dixon, but that marriage also ended in divorce. After her second divorce, Paige reconnected with Howard. He claimed to be one of the last people to see her alive. On the 28th, Howard and Paige, who were previously married, met in Eagle County, Colorado, to attend to personal matters. They spent Thursday together, after which they returned to their separate homes. Following their meeting, they continued to stay in touch through phone calls. Later, when Paige went missing, Howard quickly reached out to emergency services to report his concerns. During the call, he expressed his deep worry and belief that something terrible might have happened to her. Howard mentioned that Paige was a devoted mother who would never abandon her children without a valid reason. A recording of the call confirmed this, and cell tower data verified that Howard was in the Denver, Colorado area on the day Paige disappeared, which is a significant distance from where she was last seen. This evidence led the police to rule Howard out as a suspect. The investigation then focused on Paige's relationship with her second husband, Rob Dixon, and uncovered several suspicious incidents that required further investigation. Paige had previously reported her husband Rob to the police twice for harassment during their marriage. Before marrying Rob, Paige worked at a strip club in Denver, where she met him. Rob came from a wealthy family and had inherited a significant fortune. The two fell in love and got married in 1998. The couple settled in a luxurious home in Colorado, where Paige realized her dream of becoming a mother. Within a few years, they had 3 children who became the center of Paige's life. The early years of their marriage seemed happy, with the couple enjoying a luxurious lifestyle. However, things took a turn for the worse due to Rob's financial difficulties. Rob's family businesses faced severe issues, leading to a significant decline in their economic situation. As a result, Rob was forced to file for bankruptcy, which triggered a deep family crisis. By 2004, tensions had escalated to the point where Paige called emergency services twice. The first time, she reported that Rob had threatened to kill her and their children, but when the police arrived, they claimed to have resolved their issues. A year later, Paige reported Rob for assaulting her while she was holding their youngest child. Rob was arrested and charged with third-degree assault. He eventually pleaded guilty to 1 count of molestation, but the trial was dismissed and he avoided jail time. The couple's relationship continued to deteriorate, leading them to separate. Rob then moved to Pennsylvania. During the investigation into Paige's disappearance, Rob was interviewed to establish his alibi for that day. He claimed to have been at home and could not have harmed her. The investigators could not find any evidence to implicate Rob in her disappearance. In fact, Rob actively participated in the search for Paige. The investigating officers left no stone unturned in their effort to find clues and solve the mystery of the missing mother. The investigation into Paige's disappearance began with a thorough examination of her car. It was hoped that evidence in the car could help locate her or provide clues about what had happened. Sergeant Weiler of the County Sheriff's Department noted that arson is often used to destroy evidence, but in this case, the examination of the vehicle yielded valuable information. The driver's seat was found to be pushed back as far as it would go, indicating that the last person to drive the car was a tall individual, inconsistent with Paige's short stature. The trunk of the car contained Page's notebook, with pages torn out from June 26 to June 29. As time passed, the search for Page became increasingly urgent. A break in the case came when a driver stopped on a highway southeast of town to fix a flat tire and discovered a checkbook lying nearby. He reported it to the authorities, who then searched the area and found additional items belonging to Page, including medical records and insurance cards. Sergeant Weiler's investigation into Page Bergfeld's disappearance took a dramatic turn when he found a business card on the road, leading him to a shocking discovery. Page was secretly working as an escort under the alias Carrie. This revelation completely upended the investigation, as it revealed a side of Page's life that her loved ones knew nothing about. Previously, it was believed that Page was a devoted mother who worked hard to provide for her children after her divorce. She had started her own children's clothing business, taught dance lessons, and sold kitchen supplies. Despite her busy schedule, she always made time for her children and was actively involved in their school activities. However, the discovery of the secret phone Page used for her escort work revealed a completely different picture. This phone became a crucial piece of evidence, leading police to unravel a complex mystery that was far more sinister than anyone had initially suspected. The investigation into Page's disappearance led to more questions than answers. What prompted a responsible mother and successful businesswoman to lead a secret life? And how was this double life connected to her vanishing? These questions took center stage in the investigation, adding a new layer of mystery. To get to the bottom of things, detectives analyzed Page's cell phone, found in her car, and examined her contacts and calls from the hours leading up to her disappearance. The last call made from her phone was on June 28 around 9 p.m. This analysis led investigators to identify 7 suspects, one of whom was Lester Ralph Jones. Jones's criminal record raised red flags, particularly his history of violence against women and a previous kidnapping conviction that earned him a 5-year prison sentence. However, it wasn't the only concerning aspect. Jones's white car matched the description of the vehicle seen by Carol, Page's friend. Carol shared a crucial detail with detectives. Page had once approached her car, only to find a white car blocking her driveway. Enraged, Page got behind the wheel to turn around, but the cars collided. The unknown driver quickly fled the scene. Investigators suspected that Lester might have been obsessed with Page and was stalking her after discovering that he had tried to book an appointment with her for intimate services on the day before she vanished. When questioned, Lester denied any involvement in her disappearance and provided fingerprints and DNA samples. However, a search of his home turned up several incriminating items, including a prepaid phone, wigs, Viagra, a sheet with an escort services phone number, and women's lingerie in various sizes. The prepaid phone caught the investigators' attention due to suspicious calls made to Page's phone on the day she disappeared. Lester initially denied owning a second phone, which proved to be a lie. Using the phone's packaging found at his home, police traced the purchase to a supermarket on North Avenue. The store's security footage showed Lester buying the phone, which he refused to acknowledge when confronted with the evidence. Lester Jones became the main suspect in Page's disappearance, but the police couldn't find enough concrete evidence to charge him. They continued to investigate and search for Page's body, hoping to find proof of his guilt. However, the case stalled for several years, leaving Page's family and loved ones in a state of unbearable grief. As time passed, the search seemed increasingly futile, and the hope of finding Page alive began to fade. In 2012, a hiker stumbled upon human remains in a ravine in Delta County, surprisingly close to where Page's personal belongings had been found 5 years prior. Investigators were nearly certain the body was that of a young mother, and DNA testing confirmed it was indeed Page. Unfortunately, her story ended in tragedy. The condition of the body made it impossible to determine the exact cause of death, but it was clear she had suffered a brutal beating with multiple broken bones particularly in her face. It was concluded that her injuries ultimately led to her death. The discovery of Paige's body added a horrific layer to the story. It's believed that her body was buried, but years of soil erosion eventually brought it to the surface, which may explain why it wasn't found sooner. The discovery led to a breakthrough in Lester Ralph Jones's case, which had stalled for years. In November 2014, he was charged with kidnapping, first-degree murder, and second-degree murder. The trial finally began in July 2016 and lasted 22 days. Prosecutors claimed that Lester's frustration over being unable to see Paige, combined with his history of violence against women, motivated the crime. The prosecution's key witness, Lester's ex-wife Lisa, testified about his violent past. She described how Lester kidnapped and threatened to kill her at gunpoint in the late 1990s after she ended their relationship. On one occasion, he attacked her and her partner, shooting the latter in the head. A month later, Lester made another threat, warning her that she would be thrown into a lake. Lisa managed to escape and contacted the police, leading to Lester's arrest on charges of kidnapping and assault. In contrast, Lester's defense attorneys argued that the police had wrongly accused an innocent man and suggested that other clients of Paige's may have had motives for the crime. However, they failed to provide convincing evidence linking anyone else to the murder. Lester's current wife testified, stating that although her husband used an escort service, her faith prevented her from leaving him. Nevertheless, she could not provide an alibi for him and identified him in a supermarket surveillance video where he bought a disposable phone. Lester's first trial ended in a mistrial on September 9, 2016, when the jury was unable to reach a unanimous verdict. However, the district attorney was convinced of Lester's guilt and continued to investigate and re-examine the evidence. After several weeks, on November 21, 2016, the jury finally reached a verdict, finding Lester guilty of all charges related to Paige's death. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without parole. Lester's defense team appealed the sentence, but an appeals court panel upheld the conviction and sentence in June 2022. Paige's funeral was held on April 28, 2012. Her obituary remembered her as a beautiful and radiant woman with a smile that lit up the room. Her tragic death has had a lasting impact on her family and friends, leaving her 3 children without their loving mother and support. The tragic case of Paige captured the nation's attention and spanned many years, but through the unwavering dedication of law enforcement relatives, justice was finally served. Lester Ralph Jones was ultimately convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment without parole, ensuring he can no longer harm innocent people. Paige's courageous story stands as a powerful reminder of the significance of persisting in the pursuit of justice, no matter how long and arduous the journey may be. Her memory will forever be cherished by those who knew and loved her. The case of Lauren Burke. Lauren Ashley Burke was born on December 30, 1989, in Marietta, Georgia, to James Burke and Vivian Gershon, who later divorced. She had 2 siblings, Jacqueline and Chad Burke. After high school, Lauren attended Auburn University, where she studied graphic design and was an active member of the Delta Gamma sorority. She also played lacrosse and was involved in various campus activities. Her friends described her as a friendly, excellent student who was always smiling, happy, and helpful. Lauren started dating Sean McQuaid while still in high school, and they continued their relationship when they both enrolled at Auburn University. At that time, education was their top priority, but they still made plans for their future together. Tragically, on March 4, 2008, she began the day by having breakfast with Sean at a cafe at 11 a.m. She then attended class and called her father, James, to discuss plans for spring break and a dentist appointment. After finishing her conversation with her father, Lauren visited her friend Sean in his dorm room, where she stayed until the evening. At 8:30 p.m., she had a planned study session with her classmate Michael at the library. When Lauren left Sean's room around 8 p.m., it was already dark outside. She got into her car, a black 2001 Honda Civic, which was parked in the lot next to the dorm. This was the last time Sean saw her. Michael waited for Lauren at the library, but she didn't show up. He started calling her cell phone, but she didn't answer. He kept calling and eventually got through to her. Lauren told him she had forgotten about their appointment and hung up. About an hour later, at 9 p.m., a 911 call was made, reporting an injured girl lying on the roadside near the Farmville Baptist Church and Route 280 on the 147 freeway. Lauren was lying in the middle of the road, taking slow, deep breaths because she was suffocating. She had many injuries on her body and was only wearing socks on her feet. The traffic in both directions was blocked because drivers had stopped their cars in the roadway to help her. At 9:12 p.m., the police arrived, but Lauren was already unconscious. A few minutes later, paramedics came and found that Lauren's pulse was very weak as they loaded her into the ambulance. She was taken to East Alabama Medical Center at 9:35 p.m., where doctors started trying to save her life. Around the same time, at 9:27 p.m., multiple people called 911 to report a car on fire on the Auburn University campus. Firefighters and police were sent to the scene, but they couldn't find the owner of the burning car among the students who had come out of their dorms to see the fire. When the police checked the license plate, they found out that the car belonged to James Burke, a resident of Georgia. But what they didn't know was that James Burke is Lauren's father. The police called James and learned that the burned-out Honda actually belonged to his daughter Lauren, who is a student at Auburn University. James was frantic to know what was happening with his daughter, but the police couldn't give him any information. They didn't know where Lauren was and claimed no one was in the burned-out car. James tried calling Lauren's cell phone, but she didn't answer, which only made him more anxious. Desperate for news, James reached out to his daughter's friends, but none of them knew anything about her whereabouts or the car fire. He then contacted his ex-wife, Vivian, Lauren's mother, hoping she might know something, but she was also in the dark. Vivian called Lauren's boyfriend, Sean, at 9:40 p.m. to inform him that Lauren was missing and her car had been burned. Sean started making calls to their mutual friends to see if anyone had seen Lauren that evening. He discovered that she had canceled a library meeting, claiming she had forgotten about it. Sean was certain that Lauren hadn't forgotten her evening appointment because she had told him she was heading to the library when she left his room 2 hours earlier. Meanwhile, Lauren's family and friends were searching for her, unaware of the desperate situation unfolding at East Alabama Medical Center, where doctors were fighting to save her life. Lauren was brought to the hospital unconscious and without identification, so the doctors didn't know who she was. Despite their best efforts, they were unable to save her, and she was pronounced dead about an hour after admission. The autopsy revealed that she had died from a single bullet wound that had punctured both lungs. The shot had been fired from very close range, with the gun muzzle just inches from her skin. As police investigated the burned-out car on campus, whose owner was missing, they quickly pieced together the evidence and realized that the hospital's unidentified victim was Lauren Burke. On March 5, 2008, James Burke identified his daughter Lauren's body after traveling from Atlanta. The news of her death quickly spread throughout the Auburn University campus. As Lauren's loved ones mourned her loss, the police worked to uncover the circumstances surrounding her death, including the connection between her murder and the car fire. They also sought to determine whether other students were at risk. Investigators processed both the scene where Lauren's body was found and the area around her car for evidence. Auburn Police Captain Tom Stauffer stated that the department has dedicated all available resources to finding the person responsible for the crime. As the tight-knit student community of Auburn, Alabama, take such incidents very seriously. The police are deeply invested in solving the case and will not rest until the perpetrator is caught. To aid in the investigation, Alabama Governor Bob Riley has offered a $10,000 reward for any information leading to an arrest. The burned-out car belonging to Lauren Burks was brought to the Auburn Police Department, where state forensic laboratory investigators and state fire chief's office officers examined the charred remains. Their search uncovered burned clothing fragments, a melted digital camera, and the car's owner's manual. A significant discovery was a .38 caliber bullet found under the front seat, suggesting that the car's interior may have been the crime scene and that the perpetrator had set the fire to destroy evidence. Investigations involved interviews with Lauren's family, friends, and boyfriend, but none could identify a suspect who had a motive to harm her. Prior to her death, Lauren had been at a Sean's dorm, so detectives searched his room but found nothing linking him to the crime. After talking to Michael, the person Lauren was supposed to meet at the library, detectives discovered that when Lauren answered his call, he heard a sound similar to a moving car in the background. This new information led them to investigate further, and they found that Lauren's bank card had been used multiple times shortly after she was found lying in the road. It seemed likely that the person using Lauren's bank card was involved in her incident, so the police started searching for them. However, the case took an unexpected turn soon after. Just 2 days after Lauren's death, on March 7, 2008, at 9:55 a.m., a similar attack occurred at a Walmart parking lot in Newnan, Georgia, about 75 miles from Auburn. A 72-year-old woman was assaulted by a man of African descent as she was getting into her car. The attacker hit her on the head, threatened her, and forced her to move to the passenger seat. He then got into the driver's seat and tried to drive away, but realized an eyewitness was following him and calling for help. The perpetrator, fearing the police would be called, returned to the Walmart parking lot where they had initially been spotted. They abandoned the stolen vehicle, got into a nearby silver Chrysler Sebring, and sped away. Several hours later, 4 officers began a high-speed chase to catch the fleeing Chrysler as it headed towards Columbus, West Georgia. The driver of the Chrysler refused to stop, putting other drivers at risk during the pursuit. Officers observed the driver throwing an object out of the window, which was later found to be a .38 caliber revolver. The chase continued until the Chrysler broke down, billowing smoke from under the hood. The driver stopped abruptly in the middle of the road and opened the door. A pursuing police officer on a motorcycle crashed into the open door, causing the officer to fly over the handlebars and fall to the ground. Fortunately, the officer was not seriously injured. The perpetrator then attempted to flee into the nearby woods, but was quickly caught by the police and taken into custody. Courtney Lockhart was born on October 20, 1984. According to his family, he was a pleasant and fun-loving person before enlisting in the U.S. Army. However, after serving in Iraq from 2004 to 2005, he returned as a changed person. His mother described Courtney as a cheerful individual, but after his return from Iraq, his behavior drastically changed. He stopped smiling, became paranoid about people standing behind him, and would often hide in closets or under the bed. In 2006, Lockhart's personal life took a toll when he had a daughter with his ex-girlfriend. The same year, he was court-martialed for assaulting fellow soldiers, using illegal substances, and abandoning his unit without permission. As a result, he spent 7 months in detention before being dishonorably discharged from the Army in December 2006. In the following years, Lockhart's life spiraled out of control. By 2008, he had become increasingly troubled, neglecting his personal hygiene, abandoning his responsibilities as a father, and developing a severe addiction to illegal substances. Between February 2008 and the time of his capture, Lockhart committed a series of burglaries using a consistent modus operandi. Courtney Lockhart targeted women, approaching them from behind in parking lots as they got into their cars. He would threaten them with a gun, demand their purses, and try to take their cars. Tragically, one of these crimes ended in the death of Lauren Burke. Lockhart's string of assaults came to an end on March 7, 2008, when he attacked a 72-year-old woman but failed to escape a police pursuit. After his arrest, Lockhart, then 23, confessed to the police that he was responsible for kidnapping and killing Lauren Burke. The police interrogation, which was recorded on video, became a crucial piece of evidence in the trial. Additionally, the police found Lauren's personal belongings, including her iPod and bank cards, in Lockhart's car. Lockhart provided a detailed account of the events leading up to Lauren's death. On Tuesday, March 4, 2008, he woke up in his silver Chrysler Sebring, which he had been sleeping in near the East Alabama Medical Center. Desperate for money, he drove around Auburn looking for another victim to target. It's notable that Lockhart exclusively targeted women, never men. He eventually ended up on the campus of Auburn University, where he parked near the student dorms and spent several hours watching students from his car. At 8 p.m., Lockhart saw a girl, who turned out to be Lauren, casually walk up to the car parked next to him and open the door. Without hesitation, Lockhart grabbed his revolver and approached Lauren from behind. He poked her with the gun muzzle and demanded to know how much money she had. When she didn't respond, he forced her into the front passenger seat and got behind the wheel himself. Lauren was initially silent, but then screamed in fear. Once she calmed down, she handed Lockhart $200 from her purse, begging him to leave. However, instead of leaving, Lockhart threatened her with a gun, ordering her to remove her clothes. Lauren complied, leaving on only a pair of socks. Lockhart's motivation for making her undress was his mistaken belief that she would be less likely to try to escape without clothes. Lockhart then drove around Auburn, holding Lauren at gunpoint with one hand while steering with the other. Lauren attempted to talk him out of his criminal actions, and when he claimed his life was over, she promised to help him find a job in an effort to de-escalate the situation. Meanwhile, her phone started ringing, and Lockhart instructed her to answer it and make up an excuse to avoid arousing suspicion. Lauren was supposed to meet Michael at the library, but when he called to confirm, she claimed to have forgotten and quickly hung up. Later, Lockhart drove her through the city streets as she persistently begged him to release her, offering to help him overcome his personal struggles. As they drove down Highway 147, Lauren made a desperate attempt to escape by opening the car door and trying to jump out while the vehicle was still moving. In the ensuing chaos, Lockhart admitted to accidentally firing a shot, which tragically pierced both of Lauren's lungs, and she also sustained injuries from the fall. Lauren regained enough strength to wave at passing drivers, but soon lost consciousness. Lockhart, who had abducted her, parked his car outside a church and watched as people began to stop and assist Lauren. Realizing the police would soon arrive, he hastily left the scene, planning to destroy evidence he had left in his car. Lockhart drove to a gas station, where he used Lauren's bank card to buy a can of gasoline. He then doused the interior of his car with the gasoline, got back in, and drove to the campus where he had initially taken Lauren. His Chrysler was parked there. As he drove, Lockhart became lightheaded from the gasoline fumes, so he rolled down the windows to let in some fresh air. Once he arrived on campus, Lockhart stole $46, an iPod, and Lauren's bank cards from her car. He then set the car on fire and drove away in his Chrysler. At a gas station, Lockhart filled up his tank using Lauren's money, then returned to campus. However, investigators began to question Lockhart's story, suspecting that he had ulterior motives for making Lauren undress. They thought that Lockhart's goal was not to prevent her from escaping, but rather to exploit her in some way. When Lauren jumped out of the moving car, Lockhart's true intentions were foiled. The investigators were skeptical about Lockhart's claim that he accidentally shot Lauren. Given his military background and experience with guns, it seemed unlikely that he would accidentally discharge his weapon. Instead, it appeared that Lauren realized she was in grave danger and decided to escape by jumping out of the car, at which point Lockhart intentionally shot her. Forensic tests confirmed that the bullet found in Lauren's car was fired from the same gun Lockhart had abandoned during a police chase. Expert analysis also ruled out the possibility of an accidental shot, as the trigger required significant force to fire. On March 9th, investigators questioned Lockhart for the second time. The next day, he was officially charged with multiple crimes related to Lauren Burke's case. The trial started on November 8th, 2010. Lockhart's lawyers argued that their client suffered from a mental illness due to his military service, and that Lauren's shooting was accidental. According to court records, Lockhart pleaded not guilty, citing mental defect or insanity as the reason. Lauren was initially silent, but then screamed in fear. Once she calmed down, she handed Lockhart $200 from her purse, begging him to leave. However, instead of leaving, Lockhart threatened her with a gun, ordering her to remove her clothes. Lauren complied, leaving on only a pair of socks. Lockhart's motivation for making her undress was his mistaken belief that she would be less likely to try to escape without clothes. Lockhart then drove around Auburn, holding Lauren at gunpoint with one hand while steering with the other. Lauren attempted to talk him out of his criminal actions, and when he claimed his life was over, she promised to help him find a job in an effort to de-escalate the situation. Meanwhile, her phone started ringing, and Lockhart instructed her to answer it and make up an excuse to avoid arousing suspicion. Lauren was supposed to meet Michael at the library, but when he called to confirm, she claimed to have forgotten and quickly hung up. Later, Lockhart drove her through the city streets as she persistently begged him to release her, offering to help him overcome his personal struggles. As they drove down Highway 147, Lauren made a desperate attempt to escape by opening the car door and trying to jump out while the vehicle was still moving. In the ensuing chaos, Lockhart admitted to accidentally firing a shot, which tragically pierced both of Lauren's lungs, and she also sustained injuries from the fall. Lauren regained enough strength to wave at passing drivers, but soon lost consciousness. Lockhart, who had abducted her, parked his car outside a church and watched as people began to stop and assist Lauren. Realizing the case of Lynn Keel. Lynn and Elizabeth Keel had been married for over 20 years. Lynn worked as a truck driver, while Elizabeth was employed by Microbac Laboratories. They lived in a secluded house in Nash County, North Carolina. On January 1, 2006, Elizabeth slipped on the icy steps outside their house and fell, hitting her head on the concrete corner. The injury was fatal, and her life was tragically cut short. After a year, Lynn began to rebuild his life after a devastating event. He made a career change, leaving his job as a truck driver to pursue a new path in real estate. In 2007, his real estate work brought him to Latin America, where he met Diana, a 26-year-old woman from Bogota, Colombia. Diana was not only attractive, but also had a kind heart and was a dedicated single mother to her young daughter. Their relationship blossomed quickly, and Diana was drawn to the idea of a better life in America. She moved to the United States to be with Lynn, and they settled into his home in Nash County. This was the same house where Lynn's wife, Elizabeth Keel, had tragically died in an accident about a year earlier. Before long, Lynn and Diana got married, and soon they welcomed a son named Max into their family. Diana graduated from Nash Community College in 2017 and began working as an emergency room nurse at Wilson Medical Center the same year. In the early years of her relationship, everything seemed normal, but over time, things took a turn for the worse. According to Diana, her partner Lynn became controlling and verbally abusive, often speaking harshly to her. By 2019, Diana's daughter Laura had turned 18 and was attending the University of North Carolina at Wilmington after graduating from Southern Nash High School. Meanwhile, Diana's 10-year-old son Max was living with his parents. Diana's colleagues and patients at Wilson Medical Center held her in high regard, respecting and admiring her both personally and professionally. On March 7, 2019, Diana's mother, Esperanza Prada, who lived in Colombia, received an unexpected message from Diana that read, "Mom, I love you very much." Esperanza was disturbed by this message because she was aware that Diana was miserable in her marriage and longed to get a divorce, but Diana's fear of her husband prevented her from taking the intervention. 3 days later, Laura tweeted a plea for help, saying her mom Diana was missing and asking others to spread the word if they saw or heard anything. On the same day, Laura contacted the medical center where her mother, Diana, worked, but none of Diana's co-workers had seen or heard from her in the past 48 hours. An employee at the medical center notified the police, requesting a welfare check on Diana. The co-worker informed the dispatcher that Diana had been unreachable for 2 days. When the police officer arrived at the Keel family home, Lynn Keel was present. It was unusual that his wife's disappearance had been reported to the police by her co-workers, rather than by him. Lynn told the officer that he had last seen Diana 2 days prior, on March 8th, when she left the house. The presence of her car still parked outside the house raised further suspicions. Lynn was summoned for further questioning. When interrogated, 57-year-old Keel stated that his wife had gone out to run errands but never came back. He claimed she sometimes left for several days at a time, but his explanation was not believable. He was released without being charged. Meanwhile, Diana was reported missing, prompting the police to launch a search for her. The investigation revealed that Diana hadn't used her cell phone or bank cards in several days, which was a disturbing sign. The house where this incident took place is located in a secluded area, far from any neighbors who could provide valuable information to the police. Despite this, detectives discovered that on the morning of March 8th, Diana and Lynn had a loud and intense argument on their front porch. On the day Diana went missing, a courier delivered a package addressed to her, making him the last person to see her, aside from her husband, Lynn Keel. After speaking with Diana's co-workers, the police were convinced that she wouldn't abandon her 10-year-old son and flee. The only reason Diana didn't divorce Lynn was her fear of losing custody of her child. Everyone the detective interviewed suspected only one person of being involved in Diana's disappearance: her husband, Lynn Keel. Early in the investigation, a troubling discovery was made. 2 years prior to Diana's disappearance, Lynn had taken out a life insurance policy on her worth over $1 million, with him as the sole beneficiary. A domestic dispute had taken place at the Keel house in 2008, although no further action was taken. Just 2 days into the investigation, the police received a disturbing call. A North Carolina Department of Transportation employee reported finding something on Pokes Hole Road. A man called the police to report something suspicious in the woods, saying he wasn't sure what it was, possibly a body, but he didn't know how far in it was. The dispatcher asked if it was at the end of the road, and the caller confirmed he would wait there. Tragically, what the caller had stumbled upon was Diana's body, which appeared to have been there since the day she went missing. It turned out the caller was a worker who had been checking an illegal dumping site when he made the discovery. The body was found on Pokes Hole Road, a dead-end street surrounded by farmland. Considering the location was 30 miles from Diana's home, it was fortunate that the police found her body when they did. If not for the worker's discovery, it could have taken the police much longer to find her. At the police station, the investigators questioned Lynn about Diana's disappearance. He stuck to his story, claiming that she would often leave for several days but always come back. However, this contradicted what her co-workers, relatives, and friends had said. It was common knowledge that Lynn Keel exerted total control over his wife's life, even preventing her from socializing with friends. Despite the inconsistencies in his alibi, the police released him pending the outcome of the autopsy. 2 days after the body was found, authorities confirmed that it was indeed Diana Keel. Her death was devastating for her children, family, and friends. The medical examiner's report revealed the shocking details of Diana's death. The autopsy showed that she suffered from severe skull fractures and multiple sharp wounds on the left side of her face and neck. Notably, some of these injuries occurred after her death, suggesting that the perpetrator may have had a personal vendetta against her. When police arrived to arrest Lynn Keel and search his home, they found that he had already fled. A nationwide wanted list was issued, warning that he might be driving a gold-colored pickup truck and that he could be dangerous. After being questioned at the police station, Lynn Keel drove his 10-year-old son to his parents' home, took his father's car, and escaped. A search warrant was issued for the home Lynn shared with his wife Diana, and authorities seized a collection of firearms, including rifles, pistols, and revolvers, as well as swords, a machete, and multiple knives. During the search, authorities also found 2 pages from a diary belonging to Diana's 18-year-old daughter in a Dodge Ram owned by Lynn Keel. When asked about the contents of the diary pages, the sheriff declined to comment, stating that he did not feel comfortable sharing the information. The search for Lynn Keel, Diana's husband, continued as his whereabouts remained unknown after leaving the state. Although the sheriff's office received tips about his truck's location in Texas and Florida, no further information about his capture was confirmed. Stone requested the public's help to look out for Keel's pickup truck with the listed license plate number at local motels and hotels. On March 17, 2019, 5 days after Diana's body was found, Arizona State Police arrested Lynn Keel, 34 miles from the U.S.-Mexico border. At the time of his arrest, he had a large amount of cash and canned goods, allegedly planning to escape into Mexico. Following his arrest, Lynn Keel was flown back to Nash County, where he was charged with his wife's murder and kidnapping. Investigators believed Diana was still alive when she was put into her own SUV, driven into the woods, and left to die. Forensic evidence found in the bedroom of their home confirmed that the attack on Diana took place there. After abducting Diana, Keel went to a remote area and later visited a local Walmart to purchase cleaning supplies, which he used to try to conceal evidence of the crime. The heinous nature of the crime, combined with Keel's attempted escape from justice, sparked widespread media coverage at the local, state, and national levels. As a result, the public defender requested a change of venue to select a jury pool outside of Nash County, away from the intense media scrutiny. Lynn Keel, 59, pleaded no contest to the charges in October 2021, avoiding a long trial. By doing so, Keel accepted responsibility for the crimes. He pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and first-degree kidnapping. Keel's defense team requested that the judge consider his deteriorating health, specifically his kidney failure, and the fact that he has been in prison for 2 years during the sentencing. However, Diana's mother addressed the court, remembering the tragic reason her daughter was killed. She took the opportunity to convey a crucial message to women who may be in similar situations, urging them to leave abusive partners and not stay in harmful relationships. Diana Alejandra Keel's family expressed their gratitude to law enforcement for capturing and bringing to justice Lynn Keel, the suspect in Diana's murder. It remains unclear what motivated Lynn Keel to commit the crime, but it's possible he was driven by his discovery that Diana planned to meet with a lawyer to initiate divorce proceedings and was also aware of a life insurance policy worth over $1 million. Lynn Keel received a prison sentence of 32 to 41 years. However, the investigation didn't end there. Authorities also looked into the death of Lynn Keel's first wife, Elizabeth, which was initially ruled an accident. But her family had always questioned the events that led to her death. Elizabeth Keel's body may be exhumed if new evidence arises. Dr. John Butts, a veteran medical examiner, only considers exhumation when there are unanswered questions. While some initially accidental deaths were later deemed murders, there's been the case of Jody Sanderholm. Jody Leanne Sanderholm was born on September 26, 1987, in Arkansas City to parents Brian and Cindy Sanderholm. As the third of three children, she had an older brother named Jason and an older sister named Jennifer. From an early age, Jody had a passion for dance, which played a significant role in her life. However, she also prioritized her education and excelled in her studies. Jody's academic achievements were impressive, earning her one of 4 valedictorian spots in her graduating class. During her high school years, she was an active member of the National Honor Society, received recognition as a Kansas State Scholar, and was awarded the Outstanding Physics Student of the Year award. Additionally, she was captain of the Ark City High School dance team for 2 years and an instructor for both Ark City Dance and the Universal Dance Association. After graduating, Jody attended Cowley College, where she studied pre-pharmacy and was part of the Cowley Tigerette dance line. On the morning of January 5, 2007, Jody drove to college for a dance rehearsal that was scheduled to end at 10:45 a.m. After the rehearsal, she planned to return home. However, when her mother, Cindy, called her cell phone multiple times, Jody didn't answer, which was unusual for her. Being a responsible and communicative person, Jody always kept in touch with her family, and her mother's repeated calls went unanswered, leaving her with a sense of unease. Cindy left work early to check on Jody, who should have returned from dance rehearsal. But when Cindy arrived home, she noticed Jody's car was missing, which only added to her anxiety. Entering the house, Cindy realized Jody was not there. Her dance uniform, which she usually washed after rehearsal, was nowhere to be found. The shower stall was dry, suggesting Jody hadn't showered after dance class. Cindy soon discovered that Jody had not contacted her father or sister Jennifer either. Jody had a noon appointment, but she didn't show up. Cindy and Brian began calling Jody's friends, hoping someone had seen her. But none of them had since the morning rehearsal ended. The dance team was scheduled to perform at a basketball game that evening, and Jody, as the choreographer, wouldn't have missed it voluntarily. However, she didn't show up. By 6 p.m., Cindy and Brian were still unable to locate Jody, so they contacted the police and reported her missing. The sheriff's office quickly created flyers with Jody's description and began investigating her last known whereabouts, issuing an APB on her vehicle. On January 6th, Jody's best friend, Lori Leglider, whom she had known since high school and had danced with, provided crucial information to the police. The two friends had also attended Cowley College together, where they studied dance. Lori told the police that she had left her job at Sirloin Stockade in Arkansas City around 10 p.m. on Tuesday, January 2nd, and had noticed a light blue car driving by the restaurant multiple times as she departed. Lori noticed a car following her on her way home, which made her feel uneasy. To test her suspicion, she turned onto different streets, but the car behind her kept following. Frightened, she drove to the local police station and parked, hoping the stalker would leave her alone. When she didn't see the car anymore, she drove home. However, she soon saw the car again, so she returned to the police station parking lot and waited in her car for a while before driving home. Lori initially thought it was a prank, but she didn't report the incident to the police. On January 5th, Lori and her friend Jody arrived at the college for a dance team rehearsal. Lori recognized the same light blue car that had been following her, and she saw the driver, 23-year-old Justin Thurber, who was a local resident. Although Lori didn't know Justin personally, she had seen him with his older brother and friends before. After practice, Lori and Jody planned to meet up later, but Jody never showed up. It was then revealed that several dance team members had also seen Justin lurking around the college campus that week. In the initial stages of the investigation into Jody's disappearance, police searched the city thoroughly but couldn't find her car within the first 24 hours. The city of Arkansas is surrounded by open fields and wooded areas, making it a challenging task. To aid their search, authorities brought in a fixed-wing aircraft to scour the region from above. They hoped to spot Jody's car, which was larger and easier to detect than a person. The police investigation revealed that the last signal from Jody's cell phone was received from a tower near the Kaw Wildlife Area, a vast wooded region along the Arkansas River. At this point, only one suspect had emerged, Justin Eugene Justin, identified by Lori Legliner and other members of the dance group. Notably, Justin was already familiar to the police due to a prior incident in 2004 when he was charged with illegal possession of banned substances despite his young age. Justin was sentenced but didn't serve time in prison. Instead, he was released. However, just 3 months later, he was arrested again for stealing in Probate Nation, violating his probation. In October 2005, he was charged with disorderly conduct. 3 months after that, he was arrested for petty theft and found with illegal drugs. Then, on December 31, 2006, just 6 days before Jody's disappearance, Justin was arrested for theft once more. After posting a $3,000 bail, Justin was freed on New Year's Eve. The very next day, January 1st, he pretended to be a police officer, causing a public disturbance. When the real police arrived, Justin claimed to have chest pain and was taken to the hospital rather than the police station. It's unclear why he wasn't arrested after being discharged from the hospital, and it's also unclear how he managed to avoid consequences for his actions. A family tie to Cowley County Police might have influenced events. On January 6th, an officer spotted Justin's Cadillac at his parents' house and initiated a conversation. Justin's father invited the officer in. When questioned about his previous day's whereabouts, Justin said he drove to Winfield, 13 miles outside Arkansas City that morning. In Winfield, Justin met up with a friend and 2 acquaintances of his friend, whom he didn't know well. The 4 of them then drove around the countryside in one of the acquaintances' cars until it became stuck on a dirt road near Cedar Vale. Justin claimed that he proceeded to walk towards Arkansas City, a 30-mile journey from Cedar Vale. After 6 hours of walking, he grew tired and called his father to come pick him up. Justin's father backed his son's story, saying he'd picked him up near Cali State Fishing Lake, where Justin was wet and dirty. The officer found the story unconvincing, but lacked evidence to charge him, so let him go. That evening, police questioned Alexis Schwartzel, who had recently ended her 3-year relationship with Justin Thurber. When informed about the investigation into Jody Sanderholm's disappearance, Alexis was shocked. She revealed that Justin had once told her that he had been watching Jody since he was 13 years old, often sneaking peeks at her while she swam in her backyard pool and even peered through her bedroom window, waiting for her to change clothes. Alexis explained that she had broken up with Justin due to his abusive behavior and increasing strange tendencies. She recalled that during intimate moments, he would choke her until she lost consciousness. Moreover, he would ask her to fight him, as it was the only way he could become aroused. The police grew increasingly suspicious of Justin's involvement in Jody's disappearance, despite lacking concrete evidence. Nonetheless, Justin was arrested later that evening, on January 6th. Detective Eric Mata arrested Justin Thurber for bail violation and criminal trespassing because Justin was found on the college campus, which the detective believed he was not supposed to be on. Justin requested to speak with his lawyer when arrested. Around the same time, police officers arrived at Justin's parents' house with a search warrant. During the search, the officers took Justin's shoes, which were wet and drying on a towel. His father had helped him clean the mud from the shoes. The clothes he wore when his father picked him up were also found, but Justin had already washed them. On January 7th, rugged terrain search teams combed the Kaw Wildlife Area for Jody Sanderholm, finding shoe prints matching Justin's and smaller ones. They stopped for the night, resuming the search the next day. En route home, searchers checked Cowley County State Fishing Lake, recalling Justin was wet when picked up by his father. Near a public restroom, investigators discovered several important pieces of evidence. This included a muddy tire track, shoe prints with mud on them, and a portable toilet containing a handwritten note addressed to the parents of Jody Sanderholm. In another toilet, they found dance shoes and a flip-flop sandal that matched the footprints found at the Kaw wildlife area. Further searches yielded a collection of personal belongings, including cut-off sweatshorts, a wallet with Jody's driver's license and social security card, a black leotard, a tigerette jacket with her first name on it, a vehicle floor mat, and a car seat cushion. Search efforts focused on Cowley County State Fishing Lake and the Kaw wildlife area. On January 9th, specialists used sonar to locate Jody's submerged car. Tragically, her body was found later that day, hidden under debris. DNA evidence linked Justin Thurber to the car and body, but water in the car likely destroyed additional evidence. Forensic investigators found crucial evidence after many hours of work. A hair on Jody's car seat was matched to Justin Thurber through mitochondrial DNA testing. Private DNA expert Barbara Leal analyzed samples from Jody's arm and chest. It was possible that Justin was involved. Cell tower data showed Jody's and Justin's phones were in the same area simultaneously. This was corroborated by Jody's friend Lori, who saw Justin in the college parking lot that day. Security footage confirmed Lori's account, showing Justin following Jody in his Cadillac. Investigators believe that Justin followed Jody from college to her home, where he attacked her after she retrieved letters from the mailbox. A shoe print identical to Justin's sneakers was found by the mailbox, supporting this theory. Footprints matching Justin's shoes were discovered at the Kaw wildlife area, and smaller prints matched Jody's shoes found at the lake, along with her other belongings. In the preserve, searchers found footprints of Justin and Jody side by side, indicating they walked together at one point. However, Jody's footprints stopped and Justin's continued deeper into the woods, so he carried her further on his own. His shoe prints were also found near where the body was discovered. Moreover, the three people Justin claimed to have been with on the day of Jody's disappearance denied his story, revealing that his alibi about getting stuck near Cedar Vale was a lie. The police drove Justin to Cedar Vale to verify his alibi, but he couldn't pinpoint the location where he claimed his car was stuck. Back at the police station, Justin agreed to take a polygraph test and requested that his relative, Chad Monroe, who worked for the Cowley County Sheriff's Office, be present during the questioning. The collected evidence was sufficient to indict Justin Thurber. Despite his denial of guilt, the judge set his bail at $1 million. Justin's lawyers attempted to argue that he was mentally incompetent, but their efforts were unsuccessful. Given that Justin had graduated from high school and attended college, the judge deemed the defense's claim of mental retardation unproven. The medical examiner who performed the autopsy testified in court, describing the brutal nature of Jody's last hours. Her body and face were covered in bruises and abrasions, with clear signs of strangulation on her neck, which was ultimately determined to be the cause of her death. Here's what the medical examiner found during the autopsy. The crime was driven by sexual desire and involved an object, a stick. To give you an idea of what happened at the wildlife area without going into detail, it's worth noting that not all violent criminals are as brutal as Justin. At Justin's trial, 7 women, including his ex-girlfriend, testified that they had been stalked by him. One of these women was a co-worker who was so afraid of Justin that she had to have a police officer escort her to her car after work because she had seen him waiting for her earlier. He had left a disturbing gift on her car, a rose, and a note saying he was interested in her. Multiple witnesses reported seeing Jody Sanderholm's car on January 5, 2007. Carrie Morris, a friend of Jody's, saw Jody sitting in the passenger seat of her car as they drove past each other in Arkansas City around noon. Morris noticed that the driver was a large man. She tried to call Jody's cell phone, but there was no answer. Later that day, around 3 p.m., 2 other women reported seeing a car that looked similar to Jody's on a dirt road south of Arkansas City. One of the women identified the driver as Justin in court. After a trial, the jury delivered a unanimous verdict on February 17, 2009, finding Justin guilty on all counts. They recommended that he be sentenced to death. Justin's lawyer attempted to negotiate a plea deal to avoid the death penalty, but Jody's family opposed it. The judge ultimately sentenced Justin to death by lethal injection in March 2009. In 2008, Kansas expanded its stalking laws, increasing police authority and the definition of stalking behaviors. Since his sentencing, Justin Thurber has continued to appeal the court's decision. His lawyers are now arguing that he has a mental disability, which they claim is supported by evidence from 2018. However, the Kansas Supreme Court has put his death sentence on hold, citing a U.S. Supreme Court ruling that prohibits the execution of individuals with developmental disabilities, even if they are mild. Justin was found competent at his original trial. Years later, Jody's mother, Cindy Sanderholm, attended a hearing and was outraged that Justin had written letters to girls while in prison, seeing it as proof of his competency. Justin is currently appealing a death sentence, and a 2020 state law gives him the opportunity to request an attorney to assist with post-conviction DNA testing from the Cowley County District Court. This is significant because, despite it being 16 years since Jody Sanderholm's murder, the case is still not fully resolved. Additionally, the speaker believes that Jody pleaded for her life, but Justin did not spare her, denying her a second chance. Kansas reinstated the death penalty in 1994, but no one has been executed since then. In fact, the last execution in Kansas took place in 1965. Since the reinstatement, 10 people, including Justin, have been sentenced to death, but none of their sentences have been carried out. According to Adam Fan and Steele, spokesperson for the Kansas Department of Corrections, there are no plans for future executions. Jennifer Aldridge, Jody's sister, finds it surprising that Kansas reinstated the death penalty over 20 years ago without a plan for carrying out executions. She believes this issue should have been discussed when the penalty was reinstated. Even if Justin's death sentence is upheld, it is likely that it will not be carried out. Justin Thurber is currently being held at the maximum security El Dorado Correctional Facility in Butler County, Kansas. According to a 2014 report by the Kansas Legislative Post-Audit Committee, it costs almost $49,000 per year to keep an inmate in administrative segregation at El Dorado. Furthermore, it's not just the cost of housing a death row inmate, it's also 4 times more expensive to prosecute a case where the death penalty is sought by the prosecution. The Sanderholms feel that paying taxes is an additional unfair burden on top of the emotional pain they're already enduring as they wait for justice in their daughter Jody's case. Brian Sanderholm explained, "Every week, when I see the taxes deducted from my paycheck, it's a painful reminder that I'm supporting the person responsible for our suffering." His wife Cindy echoed his sentiments, saying, "He deserves the maximum punishment, which is what the law intended. We need to reform the law so it can be enforced effectively." If you were in our shoes, what would you want to happen to someone who harmed your child? Cynthia Ann Sanderholm, Jody's mother, sadly passed away on December 2, 2022, at the age of 63. The case of Drew Shoden. Drew Katrina Shoden was born on September 26, 1981, in Minneapolis, Minnesota, to Alan and Linda Shoden. She had an older brother, Sven. When Drew was 3, her parents divorced, but they remained on good terms. Her mother later married Sid Walker, a travel agent, and they raised Drew and her brother in a comfortable home on Whitefish Lake, a scenic vacation spot in Minnesota. Throughout high school, Drew excelled academically, earning honors and developed a passion for golf and art. Her true love was art, and her room was filled with her sketches of rock stars, models, and friends. After graduating from high school, Drew attended the University of North Dakota in Grand Forks. Those who knew her described her as a lively and caring person who loved to help others. She enjoyed traveling and exploring the country, with a dream of visiting Australia. In fact, she had plans to travel there in the spring of 2004. Before the event, Drew had 2 part-time jobs to save money. She worked as a sales associate at Victoria's Secret and as a waitress at a nightclub in Grand Forks. On Saturday, November 22, 2003, Drew finished her 4 p.m. shift at Victoria's Secret in Columbia Mall. She then went shopping and bought a purse from a store. After shopping, Drew walked to her car in the parking lot and called her boyfriend, Chris Lang. During the call, Drew suddenly said, "Okay, okay," and their connection was lost. Chris didn't think much of it since their conversation wasn't important, so he didn't call her back. About 3 hours later, Chris's phone rang again. When he answered, he only heard the sound of wind and phone buttons beeping. In a later television interview, Chris recalled his thoughts when the call with Drew was interrupted. At the time, he didn't sense any urgency and didn't imagine that something terrible was happening. He thought it was just a typical cell phone disconnection. It wasn't until later that he realized the call had been cut off for a much more sinister reason. Drew didn't show up for work at a nightclub, causing her colleagues to worry. Around the same time, her friend and roommate Meg Murphy got a call from the nightclub asking about Drew's whereabouts. Meg didn't know where Drew was and started searching for her by contacting their mutual friends and the local hospital, but she didn't find any leads. By 9 p.m., with no progress, Meg contacted the police, telling them that Drew worked at Columbia Mall. The police sent an officer to the mall, but it was already closed by the time they arrived. While searching the parking lot, the officer found Drew's car. When they inspected the vehicle, they discovered it was unlocked and showed no signs of a struggle or any evidence of a crime. However, they did find a black knife sheath on the ground near the car. The car's interior showed no evidence of theft, with personal belongings including papers, a wallet, and a newly purchased purse still on the seat, indicating that robbery was unlikely to be a motive for any trouble Drew might have encountered. With Drew's friends, boyfriend, and parents unaware of her whereabouts, investigators suspected a possible kidnapping. The investigation initially focused on Chris Lang as the prime suspect, but he was quickly ruled out after it was confirmed that he had a solid alibi, having been 300 miles away in Minnesota at the time of the incident. The police obtained information from Chris about 2 phone calls he had with Drew. The first call was suddenly cut off, and the second call, which took place a few hours later, picked up background noises, including wind sounds and button pressing. The investigators went to the mall where Drew worked the next day to review the security footage. Although there were no cameras in the parking lot where Drew's car was parked, there were multiple cameras inside the mall. Upon reviewing the footage, detectives found a clip of Drew entering a store after her shift. At 4:55 p.m., she calmly purchased a purse, wearing a pink sweater and holding a jacket. After paying, she put on her jacket and left the store, calling Chris on her way out. This call was made at exactly 5 p.m. As we know, their conversation was suddenly interrupted at 5:04 p.m. after Drew said, "Okay, okay." To recreate the events surrounding Drew's disappearance, a detective conducted an experiment. He set a timer for 4 minutes, the length of the interrupted call, and walked from the store where Drew bought her purse to the parking lot where her car was parked. When the timer went off, the detective had reached the parking lot near where Drew's car was found. This suggested that something must have happened to Drew while she was at her car. The investigation was hindered by the lack of surveillance cameras in the parking lot. Despite this challenge, Drew's disappearance generated widespread media attention, prompting a massive response from the public. Alongside the police, over 1,000 volunteers joined the search for Drew, and FBI officers were also involved in the investigation. Drew's last phone call was traced to Fisher, Minnesota, a 30-minute drive from her workplace. The surrounding area is rural, with vast fields. To search for clues, police used helicopters, all-terrain vehicles, horses, and dogs to scour the fields. They also asked local landowners to check their properties, but this initial search yielded no leads. As the investigation continued, the search area expanded daily. 4 days later, a boot was found under a bridge in Crookston, a small town about 30 miles from Grand Forks, where Drew vanished. Notably, a roommate remembered Drew wearing those boots on the day she disappeared. Forensic analysis later confirmed the boot belonged to Drew. In the Crookston area, further searches yielded no new leads, so the investigation turned its focus back to the Columbia Mall surveillance footage. This time, detectives scrutinized hundreds of hours of footage from various cameras, searching for signs of the abductor. They suspected that the person responsible might have been following Drew and could be visible in the footage. After hours of monitoring, the investigators identified a suspicious individual. The man was seen wandering aimlessly around the mall, not purchasing anything, and appeared more interested in observing the people around him than the products on sale. At 3:41 p.m., he sat down on a bench near the mall exit, continuing to watch people pass by. About 10 minutes later, he got up and walked away, wearing black gloves on his hands. After observing the man stand up and leave his seat, investigators made a crucial connection that he only did so when a blonde woman, pushing a grocery cart, walked by him and headed towards the parking lot. The detectives were convinced that this was not a mere coincidence, but rather the man had deliberately selected a potential target and was now following her. The police had no leads on the mysterious woman who was almost kidnapped at the mall, but Drew Shoden was the only person who vanished that day. Given their resemblance, it's possible the kidnapper had a specific type in mind, and so Drew was the next target. Drew left the mall around 5 p.m. when it was already dark, which could have made it easier for the perpetrator to strike. The investigation focused on 3 key locations: Grand Forks, where Drew was kidnapped; Fisher, where her phone was last active; and Crookston, where one of her shoes was found. The FBI reviewed the files of all registered sex offenders in these areas, comparing their photos to the image of the suspicious man from the mall. The only individual who fit the description was Alfonso Rodriguez Jr., a man with a criminal record marked by repeated offenses against women. Alfonso Rodriguez Jr., now 50, has spent 23 years in prison. He was born in Laredo, Texas, in 1953 to migrant worker parents. He was the second of 5 children. Rodriguez described his childhood as unhappy, citing his parents' excessive criticism and unreasonableness. For 15 years, his family moved from state to state before settling in Crookston in 1963. As he grew older, Rodriguez became increasingly isolated, partly due to language barriers. As a Spanish speaker, he struggled with English, making school challenging. He dropped out in the 9th grade and began working as a laborer at the American Crystal Sugar Company plant in Crookston. Rodriguez alleged that he was molested by older women during his youth, which he believed sparked his hostility towards women. In 1974, at 21, he asked a woman for a ride home, but instead took her to a driveway in Crookston, where he attacked her, grabbing her throat and trying to force her into submission. The following month, Rodriguez targeted another woman who was sitting in a parked truck outside a movie theater in Crookston. He threatened her with a knife and instructed her to follow him to a secluded rural area where he sexually assaulted her. In 1979, Rodriguez attempted to abduct a 69-year-old high school English teacher who was walking alone at night in Crookston. When he tried to force her into his car, she resisted. Enraged, Rodriguez stabbed her in the elbow and abdomen with a knife. Despite her injuries, she managed to escape and ran to safety. The teacher, who was also a skilled artist, created a composite sketch of Rodriguez that closely resembled him. This sketch ultimately led to his arrest. Rodriguez was found guilty of attempted kidnapping and aggravated assault, and he was sentenced to 23 years in prison. He served his sentence until his release in May 2003. Notably, Rodriguez was released from prison just 6 months before Drew's disappearance, and he was registered as a high-risk sex offender, indicating that he was likely to reoffend. Alfonso Rodriguez's family expressed concerns to the Minnesota Department of Corrections that he might revert to his old ways before his prison release. But he was released since he had served his full sentence. After his release, Rodriguez moved in with his mother in Crookston, near the bridge where Drew's shoe was found, which wasn't in his favor. Detectives questioned Rodriguez, who denied any involvement in Drew's disappearance. He claimed to have visited the Columbia Mall on the day she vanished, saying he watched the movie Once Upon a Time in Mexico at the movie theater. However, investigators discovered that no Grand Forks movie theaters were showing that film on that day. After searching Rodriguez's car, the police came to a sad realization: Drew was probably no longer alive. According to Grand Forks County Sheriff Dan Hill, the search had shifted from a rescue mission to a recovery effort. In the interior of Rodriguez's car, forensic experts discovered dark red stains in several areas, which were later confirmed to be Drew's blood. The blood was found on the rear passenger window, back seat, and 2 other areas in the passenger compartment. The DNA from the blood matched Drew's DNA, which was obtained from her toothbrush. A folding knife was found in the trunk of Rodriguez's car, which matched the sheath found in the parking lot near Drew's vehicle. A receipt showed that Rodriguez had purchased the knife and sheath from a nearby hardware store. Although Drew's body was not found, the evidence was sufficient to charge Rodriguez with her disappearance 8 days later. Rodriguez was arrested and held in a Grand Forks jail. He denied any involvement in Drew's disappearance and refused to cooperate with investigators. Despite the evidence against him, he refused to provide any information about Drew's whereabouts. During a brief bond hearing, his bail was set at $5 million. The search for Drew persisted despite the suspect's silence, focusing on 3 towns. However, the search was hampered by heavy, unprecedented snowfall in the area. To aid in the search, the governors of North Dakota and Minnesota held a press conference on December 9th, pledging to deploy several hundred National Guard members and state employees. North Dakota Governor John Hoeven expressed that Drew's disappearance had affected every North Dakotan, while Minnesota Governor Tim Pawlenty commended the community and police for their cooperation. Despite their efforts, no results were found, and the search was eventually suspended due to deteriorating weather conditions. When spring arrived, the search resumed with renewed intensity. As the winter snow began to melt, searchers hoped to finally find Drew after 5 long months. Unfortunately, it wasn't until April 17, 2004, that her body was discovered in a field in Crookston, just a few miles from where the boot was initially found. Drew's family was devastated when they received the heartbreaking news. Her father described the moment, saying that they had been waiting for that call, and when it came, it felt like time had stopped. This was their worst fear come true, and it would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The body was found in a field that had already been searched, but the large snowdrifts had concealed it. The circumstances of the crime were immediately apparent. Drew was naked from the waist down, her hands were tied behind her back, and a rope was around her neck. There were also signs of a plastic bag having been placed over her head before the rope was tied. DNA evidence linked to Rodriguez was found on Drew's jacket. An autopsy revealed that she had been subjected to a brutal beating and stabbing before her death. The medical examiner identified 3 possible causes of death: the neck wound, suffocation, or hypothermia. Drew Chaudin's family was finally able to say goodbye to her on April 24, 2004, after months of uncertainty. A mourning ceremony in North Dakota was attended by around 1,500 people. The crime involved both North Dakota and Minnesota, which made it a federal crime since Drew was taken across state lines. This meant the prosecutor's office could pursue the death penalty for Alfonso Rodriguez Jr. Rodriguez was found guilty of Drew's murder on August 30, 2006, and the jury recommended the death sentence. Judge Ralph Erickson sentenced him to death on February 8, 2007, citing the senseless and violent nature of his crime. Notably, Rodriguez became the first person to be sentenced to death in North Dakota in almost a century. However, even after 6 years on death row, Rodriguez refused to admit his guilt. It wasn't until June 28, 2013, that he finally confessed to kidnapping and killing Drew. But the story is not over yet. Ralph Erickson, a former district judge, became a U.S. Court of Appeals judge and later reversed his own decision that had sentenced Rodriguez to death. In 2021, he ordered a new sentencing phase, emphasized that Rodriguez's guilt was clear and question, confirmed by multiple DNA tests. The issue at hand is the appropriateness of the death penalty in this case. Erickson overturned the death sentence, citing two key reasons. Firstly, the defense attorneys failed to thoroughly investigate Rodriguez's mental health. Secondly, forensic expert Michael McGee's testimony was misleading. McGee claimed that Rodriguez had violated Drew's sexual integrity within 24 to 36 hours of her abduction, but there was no concrete evidence to support this, such as Rodriguez's seminal fluid on Drew's body. According to Erickson, McGee's opinion was not based on facts and misled him, influencing his original verdict. Despite reversing the death sentence, Erickson noted that the circumstances of Drew's body being found naked below the waist with her hands tied behind her back suggested a sexually motivated crime, even without Rodriguez's seminal fluid being present. Judge Erickson ruled that Alfonso Rodriguez's constitutional rights were violated because his mental health was not properly examined, both in general and at the time of his crime. The case of Carly McBride. Carly McBride was born on April 14, 1983, to Steve McBride and Lorraine Williams. As a child, she was cheerful and close to her parents. However, as she grew older, Carly struggled with addiction to alcohol and illegal substances. Despite these challenges, she made efforts to overcome them. In 2014, at the age of 31, Carly lived in Belmont, New South Wales, Australia, with her two children, 7-year-old William and 3-year-old Cadence. On September 30, 2014, Carly's boyfriend, Sale, took her to Muswell Brook, where her daughter Cadence lived with her father, Andrew Easton. Carly spent a few hours with Cadence at Andrew's house, arriving around 12:30 p.m. Sale dropped her off but did not stay, agreeing to return later that day. However, when Sale came back to pick Carly up, she was no longer at Andrew's house. According to Andrew, Carly and he got into an argument, and she left, planning to walk to the nearby McDonald's restaurant, about 20 minutes away. Sale was surprised when Carly didn't call to let him know where to meet her, so he tried calling her instead. However, he couldn't reach her. Assuming she had said she was going to McDonald's, Sale drove there to look for her. Along the way, he kept an eye out for her, thinking she might be waiting somewhere. He considered the possibility that her phone was dead, but he couldn't find her anywhere. She wasn't at McDonald's or anywhere nearby. Sale spent some time driving around Muswell Brook, but it was all in vain. Carly had seemingly vanished. When Carly failed to return home to Belmont that evening, Sale contacted the police. The detectives asked him to describe what had happened. Sale explained that their routine was always the same. He would drop her off, she would get out of the car, wave goodbye, and then call and text him twice to let him know she was safe. But on this particular day, things didn't go as usual. Sale dropped her off at 12:30 p.m., but never heard from her again. Despite trying to call and text her, the phone just rang out. A key question emerged. Did Carly leave her ex-partner Andrew Easton's house, or was he hiding something? Andrew claimed to be the last person to see her, but no one else could confirm she actually left his house. The police questioned neighbors and people along the route Carly would have taken to get to McDonald's, but nobody reported seeing her. This lack of eyewitnesses only fueled suspicion about Andrew. Unfortunately, there were no surveillance cameras near Andrew's house to verify his claim that Carly left around 2 p.m. The police searched fields behind a nearby residential area, but the chief investigator reported that nothing significant was found. The investigation will continue, and the police are urging anyone with information about Carly's disappearance to come forward. She was last seen wearing blue jeans, sandals, and a yellow t-shirt, and carrying a tan handbag. Police investigators obtained a search warrant and thoroughly searched the house where Carly was last seen, looking for clues that could help explain her disappearance. Despite their efforts, they found no evidence of criminal activity or new leads. However, they did stumble upon a suspicious discovery. Carly's Facebook account had been deleted just a few hours after she went missing, and before anyone had even reported her disappearance to the authorities. This mysterious deletion sparked a lot of questions and prompted further investigation. 9 months after Carly's disappearance, her parents, Steve and Lorraine Williams, sought assistance in finding their daughter. With the help of Detective Timothy Seymour, they made a public appeal, requesting any information that could aid in the case. During the appeal, Lorraine became emotional and pleaded for help, saying that if anyone knew anything, no matter how small, they should come forward and help them. The family has struggled since Carly's disappearance, with Steve and Lorraine explaining that their situation is complicated, particularly when it comes to Carly's children. The children have 2 different fathers, and the family has had limited contact with them. Steve and Lorraine hope that this will change, allowing them to reconnect with their grandchildren. Lorraine expressed the deep sorrow of Carly's children, who would never again experience their mother's loving kisses, warm hugs, and laughter. They were unable to say goodbye, and their memories were frozen in time. She described the family's pain and frustration, feeling trapped in limbo, and emphasized their need to find Carly and give her dignity and respect in death. Carly's children, William and Cadence, needed to know what happened to their mother to heal and move forward, free from the burden of pain and uncertainty. Lorraine begged for the truth, expressing that while her daughter was gone, her children needed closure and justice. She implored the responsible person to come forward, break their silence, and let the family find peace. The police shifted their focus to Sale Newson, another possible suspect, as they were unable to connect Carly's disappearance to her ex-partner, Andrew Easton. Investigations revealed that Carly and Sale's relationship was troubled. Sale was extremely jealous, which often sparked their arguments, despite their relatively short time together. Although Sale publicly claimed to be deeply in love with Carly, saying she was the first woman he had loved in 14 years, his actions told a different story. He started intimate relationships with other women almost immediately, even offering sex to several women just hours after reporting Carly missing. On October 2nd, just 2 days after Carly's disappearance, Sale spent the night with another woman, yet in public, he pretended to be grief-stricken over losing the love of his life. Detectives also learned that Sale and Carly had an argument 2 days before she vanished, triggered by Facebook messages from other men. However, while this evidence was suspicious, it was still circumstantial, and the police needed more concrete evidence to bring charges against Sale Newson. In 2015, authorities searched 3 properties in Muswellbrook and Scone, N.S., seizing 3 firearms, illegal substances, and arresting 24-year-old James Kineen, unrelated to Carly's disappearance, but a notable name in the investigation. 2 years after, on September 30, 2014, the police investigation had stalled with no new leads. But on August 7, 2016, a major breakthrough came when 2 pedestrians stumbled upon human remains in a shallow grave in a bush off the road near Scone. Forensic analysis confirmed that the remains were indeed those of Carly McBride. The police waited 4 days before announcing the discovery, hoping to gather more evidence. Carly's parents, who are still grieving, are asking the public to come forward with any information they might have. They are thankful for the help that led to finding their daughter's body, but they still want to know who was responsible for her disappearance and are seeking closure. Over 10 months, investigators probed a case, leading to Sale Newson's arrest warrant on June 19, 2017. After his arrest, Newson denied involvement in Carly McBride's death. Authorities also charged James Canine, 26, for helping Newson dispose of the body. The three knew each other from a rehab center for addicts, staying in touch despite leaving at different times. The trial of Sale Newson began in 2018 and lasted for years due to limited evidence. Prosecutors claimed Newson attacked Carly in a jealous rage, causing her death. Forensic experts found she died from multiple blunt force trauma, including 23 skull fractures and 13 torso and spinal fractures. The judge ruled Newson's actions caused Carly's death, noting he had claimed to be a skilled mixed martial arts fighter with 20 undefeated fights. The judge concluded Carly died from severe brain trauma caused by a high degree of force to the head, likely inflicted by Newson's fists, feet, or objects. During a search of Newson's house, police found a map in a shoebox under the bed with a circle around Muswell Brook and Scone, where Carly's remains were later found. The map also had numbers 1, 2, and 3 written on it, which a senior constable linked to point-to-point cameras. Newson mentioned to Carly's father that the skeleton was missing hand bones, a detail only known to the police, Carly's parents, and the forensic medicine department. This suggested Newson was familiar with the crime scene and had left Carly's body there. The clothes on the remains matched what she wore on the day she disappeared, indicating she died soon after leaving her partner's house. The police couldn't find her purse and phone. When police searched Newson's mobile phone, they discovered he had deleted Google location services between September 18th and October 2nd, 2014. During the trial, the investigators learned that the photo of Carly, which Newson took on the way to Muswell Brook and later used in missing person flyers, was edited and cropped even before the police received the report of Carly missing. When the search for Carly began, Newson offered a $20,000 reward for information about her whereabouts. However, his bank account showed he was broke, which meant he offered the reward only because he knew no one would ever find her. Thus, he wouldn't have to pay. Newson injected himself into the police investigation from the start, trying to deflect suspicion onto others and attempting to get information about where police and other emergency services would be searching. He also conducted a canvass of the neighboring streets, searching for CCTV or witnesses, which police said was done not to find information, but to suppress it and to determine if anyone had seen him intercepting Ms. McBride. While volunteers and police searched for her around Muswell Brook and handed out missing person flyers, Newson was in Sydney messaging friends about how he was driving an Audi R8. The more investigators dug into Newson, interviewed him, looked at his Facebook messages, listened to his phone calls. After examining his internet search history, investigators discovered that he was looking for information on how to delete a Facebook account. His account remained active, but Carly's account got deleted shortly after. Although all the evidence was circumstantial, the prosecutors said they did have puzzle pieces that began to reveal a picture when put together. Eventually, these pieces turned into an irrefutable case, ruling out any other possible explanations for how Carly McBride disappeared and how her body was about 82 feet from the side of the road. The judge found that Newson's motive for suddenly and violently attacking Carly was jealousy. Newson had gone to pick Carly up from Muswell Brook, expecting her to have spent time with her daughter as planned. Instead, he discovered she had met her ex-partner for 90 minutes. This revelation allegedly triggered a fit of jealousy in Newson, leading him to brutally attack Carly. Carly's mother, Lorraine Williams, recounted the immense grief and anxiety she experienced during a 2-year wait for justice. A wait that ended with the devastating realization that her happy and outgoing daughter would never come home to her 2 young children. When she finally saw Carly again, it was in the morgue, an experience she described as the worst day of her life. In December 2021, 43-year-old Newson was found guilty and sentenced to 27 years in prison with the possibility of parole in 2038, nearly 7 years after reporting Carly missing. Despite the guilty verdict, Newson maintained his innocence, stating to the judge. Newson's accomplice, James Canine, also denied his involvement but was found guilty by a jury in July 2022. The judge determined that Canine had lied to police 3 times to create a false alibi for Newson and deleted phone data to conceal his actions. At the time of his involvement in the Carly McBride case, Canine was already in prison for illegal weapons possession and prohibited substances. In November 2022, he was sentenced to 7.5 years in prison with a 4-year parole period, showing little reaction to the news. After the trial, Carly's parents expressed relief that justice had been served, but they also acknowledged that no matter the outcome, they would never be able to get their daughter back.